Welcome. uh, you are my mother's sister.
Yes,
Yes. Thank you very much for being on this with me.
sure.
um, you have been Sonya Leino for how many years now instead of Jotakinos?
This will be 25 years.
25 years. Well done. Good for you. That's a big one.
It is a big one, yes.
Yeah. Are you guys doing anything special? Are you guys just going out for dinner or having a nice family get together?
Well, we were thinking of doing something pretty big, but in light of COVID and all the craziness,
Right.
we'll probably delay celebrations and do something kind of big maybe next year, being very hopeful thing will be over by that time.
Yeah, 26 is also a good number. It's so
Yeah.
sad that COVID canceled so many plans.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I had a friend that was planning on getting married in March last year, and the on a cruise ship. And right
Oh
before they
man.
had like the last minute, uh, they found out that that same cruise, like everybody that was on the ship caught COVID. And he had some older people gonna be at his wedding, and he's just like, okay, well, we have to cancel this, and that sucks. And I feel bad for him.
Did he get married anyway?
Yeah, he ended up getting married at a nice place in Hollister, I think. Um, and it was actually really nice. It was at a place called the Vault, and it was like an old um, jazz music place that has like a ballroom on the
Oh,
bottom floor, and then like a just a cool multi-purpose room above that he got married in, and it was beautiful.
very nice. Well, it worked out then.
Mm. So growing up with my mom, what is one memory right off the bat that you remember of her,
Of your
or
mother.
any moment or just a feeling of that you remember from childhood with her?
Wow. Um, that's a whole childhood to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Did you like having two younger sisters?
Actually, I'm the middle, so I only had one
Oh,
younger sister.
I forgot. I always think that you were the oldest.
Yeah, that's funny.
I feel like you just carry yourself like very mature,
Oh, well, thank you. I hope.
very grown up.
It's funny, one that stands out right at this moment, but it probably wouldn't be something that stood out most of the childhood was you're overseas in Italy. I remember just recently thinking about your mom when she kind of started getting sick.
Mm.
Um, we were we had like another half a year to go in Italy, and she just she normally was this like vivacious, like just put herself out there, just kind of person who just had all this energy and just wanted to go and hang out with people and get to know people, and then all of that started kind of fading a little bit. She lost energy.
Mm.
Her speech started to slur. Her eyes started to droop a little bit. She
Mm.
just wasn't herself. And that was about the time that we started talking about leaving a little bit early and then going stateside to try and get her looked at and figure out what was going on with her.
Wow, I didn't know about that. And that's when you guys
Yeah,
moved to Salinas.
yeah, that's when we moved stateside. It just, yeah, it's weird to see somebody kind of transform like that in your to have this just burst of energy to like have absolutely no energy at all. And that was one of the reasons why we came stateside was because Aunt Vicky still had like another semester to go for her senior year, and it kind of stunk that we had to leave early, but
Right.
it was obviously necessary, and so we came. And she got into a hospital right away, I think in San Francisco it was, and they did her thumectomy that she had, and it resolved the problem for whatever reason. It doesn't always resolve the problem in everyone, but for her, it worked. And, attribute that to God's hand in taking care of her and providing a way for us to get her the help that she needed. And then all of a sudden, the little bits of energy started coming back, and the spunk came back, and
Mm.
and she was back to herself, which was really a nice thing to witness as a child.
Mm. I'm. I can't be more happy than hearing about her getting better.
Yeah.
uh, was there a lot of uh, with her? Because I don't think I've talked with her really much about it. Was that really the biggest issue? Because I don't remember much else besides that. That's where she got her scar from, right?
Yeah, the surgery to resolve. Yeah, yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm grateful that was the only
Yeah, I'm really happy because
physical
that's some
thing.
serious
Yeah,
stuff. Usually, sometimes that comes with more surgeries down the line, and I'm really glad that she got better after that.
yeah, they because it's an autoimmune thing, and they don't really know how those things happen even today. They I don't think they've ever been able to say that that completely resolved itself because they can't say that they knew the cause, so they can't say that she's absolutely cured. But as far as I know, she hasn't had any issues with that since.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't think that I've ever seen any issues since ever actually. I've heard the stories of her going through that, but I didn't realize that you guys actually had to leave Italy a little early for that reason. But I'm glad she
Yeah,
got the help she needed.
yeah, so definitely we were too. I remember seeing her. Actually, I guess I get a little confused because there was another. I guess one other kind of big thing, but not nearly that big, was when she got her tonsils out when she was little.
Oh, those are always fun stories to hear about.
Yeah, I just remember visiting her in the hospital, like, and she's getting to eat all this like ice cream and like yummy food, and as a kid, you're seeing your sister like she's at the hospital and she's eating all this yummy food, like, hey, fair. But obviously, she just had her tonsils removed, so it was quite fair. So,
Do you think that if you could have your same sisters, but like move around, who's the oldest and who's the youngest, as far as middle child, youngest and oldest, where would you put yourself back in middle, or would you say you would like to be the oldest, or you would like to be the youngest?
oh, I'd put myself back in middle.
You like where you are?
I like where I'm at. Yeah, I think I think we're kind of put in the positions we are for a purpose and a reason. And I think if you change the position that I was in, you change the person that I am. And
Mm,
uh, while I'm not necessarily happy with everything about myself, I'm certainly
mm. It's a work in progress for
glad to be
all
here.
of us, right?
I'm sorry, what?
It's a work in progress for all of us.
Absolutely, yes. But I am happy at the place I am in life, and for all of my circumstances have kind of brought me to this point. So,
Mm. And has James started school yet, or is he starting school next semester?
college, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, he's graduating this semester, so he has to still finish up.
Are you excited? Or is he excited?
He's an interesting kid.
Very.
He he's not necessarily a very expressive kind of a guy.
Mm,
So I think he's a mixture of excited, but more just a little nervous about what's to come after this.
It's nerve wracking, really.
Yeah, I think it's nervous for any kid, but I think when you have some particular struggles, sometimes that's a little bit challenging to think through. So
Mm. And he's 18 now, right?
he's 18 now. Yeah,
He's so he look because I haven't seen him in person. Is he tall?
he's tall. He passed up Rich, I think, last year, and now he's I think he's approaching like he's over 6 feet now. So
Nice.
he's probably like 6'1" if I had to guess right now, and still has I think some room to grow. Right, boys don't
They
stop
always
growing
told
until
me that
21.
I was gonna stop at 6, and then I ended up getting all the way to 6'2", and I'm still there.
Yeah, I think he might be eventually get to where you are.
Right. That's nice. 6'2" is nice. It's a blessing for sure. And
Absolutely.
I've never looked at someone in a store asking me to take something off the top shelf as a negative. It's always been a positive because it's really mutually beneficial. It's like I get to help somebody with something that they were struggling with, and they get that thing that they were struggling to get. Whenever they
Yeah,
ask me, it always makes me smile because I know that they actually would like some help.
absolutely. Yeah. I think the only time I ever like we were tall for girls. I mean, not super tall, but on the tall side. And there were a
How
couple
tall?
times. I'm 5'9".
Yeah, well, 5'8" I think is. Oh wait, no, actually, is it 5?
5'6" is, I think, the average, or actually maybe even shorter than that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
Might be.
5'6" is the. I think 5'8" is for boys. It's the average
Uh-huh.
for boys. So you
Yeah.
guys are pretty tall. Nice, good for you. I like
Yeah.
the tall
But
kids.
there, yeah, we for the most part didn't mind them at all. There were a couple times growing up though, like we did softball growing up, and one year we were on a team with green uniforms, and a few kids like had fun kind of teasing us about being the Jolly Green Giants kind of a thing, you know,
That stuff
kind
has
of
stuck with you
mean,
over the years.
kind of mean. But yeah, in hindsight, it's not the worst of things people could have called us.
Hey, being
And then
called
like
jolly
for class pictures, growing up in school, like, we either had to sit Indian style in the front, like in elementary school, or we had to sit up in the back all the time and stuff. That's not the most horrible thing.
Yeah, that
Sometimes you
that
just mix
poppy
with everybody else. Yeah.
stains from Germany. Tall people.
Uh, yeah, I guess, there's not much German in there, but maybe that could be the little bit of German that he had.
Isn't he like half German?
Lithuanian.
Lithuanian. I guess they're tall there too. It's all Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of, that Russian kind of, I don't know what the height over there is.
Lithuania is on the border of Russia, right?
Right.
In the
It's kind of, it's one of the Baltic states.
right over there, but it's like in the top eastern side of Europe.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But Gigi was Irish, and I think she had some German in her as well. But it's more of a blend with her, like English, German. I think English, Dutch, and Scotch Irish, mostly Scotch Irish more than anything.
And Gigi was Poppy's mother.
Yes.
Okay. I think I remember meeting her. Maybe. I'm not sure though. I was young. Do you know? Do you know if I mean you're not my mom, but do you know if I met her when I was like very young before I would remember that?
I'm pretty sure you did. She and Grandpa would come out to visit pretty much yearly to see Poppy and to see the rest of us as well. So we'd always try and see her. I'm pretty sure if any of the grandkids um, had the opportunity to see her, you and probably Sammy probably saw her more than anyone.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think there's some pictures of us in that area, so I'll have to dig some up and see if I can find some and send them to you.
Yeah, I would actually like to go through maybe any pictures anybody has of old family pictures and stuff like that because that would be nice to see. Maybe it'll
Yeah,
jog
and
my memory of
actually,
meeting her.
did you go to the funeral? Do you remember?
Gigi's funeral?
Huh?
How long ago was that?
That was 2012, I believe.
I want to. Yes, I did go. I did go. Yes. But I didn't have a lot of memories of her at that time.
Okay. And then did you go to Grandpa's funeral? I can't remember. Because if you went to Grandpa's funeral, you would have seen her there too. Not the best place to see her, but
Uh,
he
no,
was probably
that was a
a
lot
few years
later. I
prior.
think I was in middle school
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
I remember when mom got that news, and that was rough.
yes. And she, unfortunately, Gigi would have not been quite what we remembered her as um, before because she had had a head injury prior to that.
She had a head injury.
Yeah.
Do you, how did
Remember
that
that?
happen? Was that just a fall, or was there something more serious?
Yeah, well, Grandpa was in a nursing home and she was visiting him. And on her way out of the nursing home, a gentleman asked her to help push his wheelchair. And unfortunately, one of the handles was loose on his wheelchair. And in the process of trying to push him, she slipped and fell down and hit her head.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, she was just trying to help out that guy. And he probably didn't even
right.
know
And
that was going to happen.
probably didn't even know it was going to happen. And she unfortunately had issues with the head injury and she had to get surgery prior and she had just come out of surgery when we heard about grandpa's passing,
Wow.
so it was kind of a crazy time.
That's a bit of a whirlwind.
Yes.
Hmm. But at least you have a lot of good memories with her. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, she was fun to talk to. She
Mm.
she helped me understand a little bit more about what it meant to, grow older and what that would be like for some people and, and so forth. And I thought, wow,
Mm. It's
she
scary.
struggled with it a bit. Yeah, I think she felt a little lonely as she got older and just wanted to talk to people and so forth. And so it just kind of things in perspective sometimes. But she was a hoot. She was lots of fun.
Yeah. I the grandmas are really fun, and especially when you get to talking with them, they have really nice insights on the world.
I think so, yes.
I wish I wish going back that I had talked with Grandma Latham more or hung out with her more when we lived at the same property together. Because that was rough when I went and visited her at the end of her life, and that was something that I don't think I can forget. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the funny thing is, I think because we all get older and we go through that kind of stuff, I think somehow grandparents, even though you might feel like maybe you wish you had talked to them more and stuff like that, and that's definitely something you can, of course, feel you're able, you can feel that way, but I think they just sort of know, they understand because they've been there, they
Right.
just sort of know, like, yeah, they know that you love them and they know that sometimes things are hard and that it's hard for people sometimes to always express those things to them. But I think age and maturity kind of helps them just to recognize that even before it's said.
Yeah, and that's good too because I think there's um, even thinking back to how it was when I was 18, it's just like wow, I didn't realize that I had a lot of growing I still had to do.
Yeah, we all get there.
Parents they look at everybody that way that's in their family because that they've been through it. They understand.
Oh yeah, and the funny thing is, I have even once I get to that age, I'm still going to feel like I have a lot of growing to do as well. We're just constantly in that state of growth where we're trying to figure things out, and then you figure out one thing, and well, here's something new to figure out. So,
Hmm. How do you feel about being on this podcast in general? It's kind of spooky, right?
I just wasn't quite sure what to expect, but it, I was willing to go with the flow because I love you and I trust you, and I figured, you're not like putting me on here like as the
No,
inquisitor or something.
no, exactly.
I figured whatever the conversation was, it was going to be productive and fun
Hmm.
and cool. So yeah, but
Would
maybe a slight bit nervous about exactly what you were going to ask. Not sure.
basically, if I were to give you the premise of what this is, um, it's kind of scary with the politics right now, with what's going on in the world. It feels like there's a lot going on, and everyone's yelling at each other, and no one really knows what to say. But if I were to say what the problem with American society right now is that everyone's an idiot, and nobody wants to talk about it, about anything really. So we end up in these little bubbles, and we keep talking to our friends as if like as if we can get the answers and then we can just share that with everyone else and they'll just agree with us. And then it doesn't work and then everybody fights on it and then that just keeps going on and on and on until we get to the point we're at now where we just had a person that like and I'm not even super against Donald Trump, but we just had a person that was Donald Trump as president of the United States, which is a little bit alarming at the bare minimum for me. Um, and I don't know how we got to that point, and I don't know how we can get to a better place for dialogue in this society. But one thing that I do know that I can do is I can talk with my family with the caveat that I'm talking to them with love. So the point of this podcast would be to an opportunity for you and I to talk about important issues that you don't we I don't normally talk about with anyone. Political stuff, uh, religious things, any other questions or concerns anyone has that we can debate on. And for some reason, it's just a scary time right now. And the way I'm looking at it is as if like the world's on fire, and all I can do is the only thing that I can do really is take a bucket of water and dump it on my family, and hopefully that helps. Maybe that'll do something, because and that comes down to why it's a podcast is because no matter what, from now on, regardless of what you want, you're going to be recorded. And on a podcast, you can decide whether or not you want to be on it, and that is wonderful and lovely. And of course, everyone needs their own time to be a part of something like that. But at the same time, whether you like it or not, your views are going to be recorded and shared without you wanting it or not. So it would be good to have an opportunity to express them willingly. Um, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just rambling. But that being said, would you are you open to talking about politics?
Sure.
Awesome. I assume, being that I know that you have a conservative household, that you are conservative. Would that be right?
Um, yeah, I mean, if you have to put somebody in a political box, you could probably put me in a conservative box, but I prefer more to identify myself as just more being a Christian as opposed to conservative.
Yeah,
But
that does tend to lean into the conservative side.
yeah, although I think there's a distinction between the two. Just necessarily being a conservative doesn't necessarily mean you're a Christian though either. So
True, and
uh,
vice versa.
vice
There are
exactly,
plenty of Christian Democrats. In fact, it
absolutely.
seems like most of them say that they would be that are that are in office. Um, how about a more recent issue? How awful was what happened to George Floyd? It was. Did you hear about that story?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was all over the place. How could you not hear about it?
Right,
So,
exactly. Uh,
um,
I think that
yeah.
that was an example of a failure of the police system, for sure. And I'm not saying that to all of police, but that unit right there, 4 police officers, allowing that man to be essentially suffocated and probably cause his death is absolutely horrifying. Um, do do you think that now, because of this conversation, that we should move more in the direction of reforming the police, defunding the police, uh, getting rid of them altogether, which is more extreme but possible?
Oh, I definitely think that, any place could use reform. I don't know that I don't think defunding is the solution because I think a lot of police departments are already kind of struggling to figure out how to distribute the money anyhow. And in order to do reform, you usually need money to reform. So you want education programs, if you want more trainings and stuff, that's going to require money to make that happen. And so possibly reconsidering where some of that funding goes and retraining, I think that could benefit anybody. I don't think it ever hurts for people to get some better training and or if police officers look at themselves a little bit more and to determine why did this happen and why did police officers make the choices that they made, because that is a fail that shouldn't have happened. That's wrong.
Right. Yeah, I think that the conversation got a little wild though. I can't. I still am really surprised that so many people thought that abolish the police was the right way to go, and that people are very passionate about that too. And I don't understand how someone could get to the point where they're like, yeah, let's get rid of police entirely because bad things happen sometimes.
Last year was just crazy in general. I
True.
think when you look at, you always have to put things in their context. And so when you think of, we've been in COVID, it's, summer, it's hot, there's people are being locked down, they're getting frustrated with it, things are happening. And then you've got the emotions that rise anytime there's a huge violent thing like this that kind of happens, and you put it all together. And it's just, I think a lot of people were speaking more from emotion than really logic because yes, it makes sense that these police officers did something wrong, and perhaps that police department itself needs training, and other police departments may as well. But it doesn't make any sense to remove the police altogether because then you're talking about complete chaos and people taking advantage of there not being law and order as well. So
Knowing full well that we're civilians, from your perspective, is there a change that you would implement if you were in charge that might actually help, or you might think would be a better option to try?
for the police,
Yeah, is there something that you can think of off the top of your head? A
now
suggestion, a change, or
I
something?
wish I was more familiar with how they run and how they conduct their trainings and things like that. I think that would be, if somebody were going to make that call, they'd need to be familiar with kind of what they already do and how that needs to be revamped. I don't know much about that, unfortunately. But, putting people in place who are familiar with how the police work and how their training happens and so forth, and having them reevaluate what could change and what could be different. Maybe that would be the thing I would do if I had the choice. But
Hmm.
I don't want to be an armchair psychologist or whatever and assume that somehow I somehow know the solutions for the police department.
Right. Well, I mean, nobody does, and that's kind of the point of the conversations, because most of
Yeah.
us, except for a few experts in the fields, most of us are just average Joes when it comes to subjects. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about it. Most likely we'll be wrong, or most likely we'll be missing something major. But at the same time, maybe we're onto something. Maybe the sentiment that we're talking about is needed in that system that we're talking about. Maybe a police officer one day will hear something that an average citizen suggested that actually was a really good idea, and also I feel like uh, the other reason for podcast is it is nice eventually to be able to look back and see our opinions change and see what we saw about something controversial at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Floyd was a big moment in American history, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things change because of that,
Right.
if anything changes at all. um, Conservative beliefs really kind of center around a few things. If I were to say that what conservative beliefs center around, um, I think it would be family centered, most likely. Um, Structure for sure. Much more interested in making a system better or keeping a system running well. Um, I think that very supportive of police officers usually. Is this all sound right to you?
Well, that's definitely some of it.
Right. What's another thing that you might add?
Um, well, for me, I think a big part of it is also having the government stay out of a lot of the a lot of those things that you were talking about, like the government being present and having
Less
some
regulation.
yeah, having less regulation, less control over things, and allowing people to govern themselves for the most part, which I think in a lot of ways is how our country was kind of established, with a government in place, but that the government trusting that the people would have the ability to govern themselves to a degree. Now, obviously, that doesn't always happen, but
Right.
more generally speaking,
Hmm.
for me, that's a big part of it. And also just, but yeah, family values, structure in place. I'm not completely in agreement with all the conservative things. Like, I don't know about all the business decisions and choices stuff, but taxes, nobody wants taxes, you know.
It's true. It's the one thing that Democrats can't figure out or get around.
But, it's the conservatives tax, liberals tax. Sometimes I think we get a little too crazy with the taxes, and I think maybe that's something that I think it's fairly close, but I would probably say I think liberals tend to tax a little bit more than Republicans do.
For sure. For sure.
It's, or what do you want to call it? Democrats, Republicans? Like, I'm getting words interchanged.
Democrats tend to go for more social institutions sort of thing, social
Yes,
programs, which
yes,
tends to mean that they
absolutely.
have to tax more. Republicans are
Yes,
more interested in freedoms, allowing everyone to make their own decisions, so they want less taxes,
yes,
which is a really
yes,
easy distinction, I'd say.
absolutely, yes.
And
Some
that's
social
unfortunately that
things.
most people tend to lean on the Republican side when it comes to taxes, of course.
Absolutely, yes.
Hmm.
And I'm for
Uh,
some social things, but not others. So
uh,
I'm not super strong on the conservative side on that, but
you know what I haven't talked to anyone about recently? I don't know a lot about it, like for sure. But do you know anything about what's going on in the Middle East? About with wars and such?
Um, that's a little more complicated. I mean, I've got a little sense of it, but I wouldn't say I'm very like
Hmm. Neither am I.
profoundly yeah, educated on that. That's for sometimes I lean to my husband and ask him a few more questions about that because he studies a little more of those things.
Maybe I'll ask him one day. I'll see if he'll be
Yeah,
willing to do the podcast eventually.
yeah, yeah. He'll have a different perspective, definitely coming from a military background. So,
Right. What position did he get to before he left the military?
a lieutenant colonel.
And I don't know anything about the military. Is that uh, what is the levels of that you go through to get to that point? Do you
So you would through second lieutenant as far as the officer ranks. I'm not. I always get the enlisted ones confused, but officer ranks. It's a second lieutenant, first lieutenant. Then you go to I believe it's captain, and then major, and then lieutenant colonel, and then after lieutenant colonel, you go to colonel. But there's different ranks of colonel. And I'm not as familiar with those, but I think you get up to full bird colonel, and then after that, there's general, and then you get like the different stars of generals and so forth. So he's kind of in the middle of the pack
mm.
where his rank ended up.
And then he ended up working with civilians, right? For some company somewhere.
Yeah, he retired in was it 2011, so it's been a few years now, about 10 years now. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and then he got a job in the civilian sector, and so now he actually works with the military yet again, but in a civilian job and does contracts with them. So for proposals and different things like that to do business for the government. So,
That's really
but not
interesting.
also some other private places as well.
Hmm.
But he's got insight into that area and kind of knows how to communicate and talk with. And so that, of course, is beneficial to the company and beneficial to the government as well.
Hmm. For sure. I did want to ask you about your degree. You have a degree in what? Family therapy, family and marriage counseling.
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in psychology and then a master's in family and child therapy.
Wow, that's really impressive, actually.
Thank you.
A master's. Do you do you see yourself once the kids are up and out of the house? Do you think that you're gonna go back into that full time, or do you think that you're gonna use what you have just in everyday life?
Well, I feel like I kind of went into it full force before I had kids. I practiced for a while, for a little
You
while, and
did.
I did practice for a little while, not in my own practice, at somebody else's practice. I never was able, unfortunately, to become fully licensed because it was a lengthy licensure procedure. And around the time, I still had a ways to go, and we were trying to make it work. I had James, and then we were trying to make it work, and it was just too challenging
Hmm.
to work for the two of us. So I decided to stay home and was happy to do so. And I have been actually thinking lately about when I'm going to restart that again and pursue that again. I'd have to go back to school for a few classes just to refresh my and then pursue the licensure again. Debating whether I want to do that or not, but I think so. But for now, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately. I mean, now's the right time to be thinking about it, but not the right time to start on it just yet. We've had a number of different things happening in our family that have made it challenging, that have required some extra attention other than just the average kind of raising your children kind of a thing. And so that's been more of a priority than going back to work just yet.
In
And I
family,
don't
meaning
go
our
back to work.
family or your specific
Oh,
immediate
just
family.
specifically mine. Yeah, just different health things over the years. Having a couple of children that have some learning, issues and things like that, and the extra attention that requires and is involved. And then last year having some health issues of my own. Um,
Right. How are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing fine, doing really well. I think stable is a good word. Like just I wouldn't now, if you asked me, I wouldn't feel like there was anything that had even happened
That's
last year. So
interesting because I remember that you had some vision problems, right?
yeah, so it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll be as brief and then let you decide if you want to ask me more questions. So like around Christmas time of 2019, was it? Yeah, 2019. I was wrapping presents for the kids one night, and then I thought, huh, my something just seems a little weird. And then I just thought, I've just been up late wrapping presents. I'm probably just pretty tired, and I went to bed. And the next day was Christmas. Actually, it was Christmas Eve. So the next day was Christmas. And, we woke up and did all the Christmas stuff. And my eye was still not quite seeing exactly right. It wasn't bad. But so I called a friend to wish her a Merry Christmas. And I was asking her, what, you struggle with vertigo? What's vertigo like? Thinking maybe that was what it was. And I started talking to her a little bit, and she's like, "No, that's not what it sounds like." And she's, "Let me get my husband over here. He was an optician, he would know." And he said, "Well, have you tried covering one of your eyes over the other?" And I said, "Oh no, I didn't even think to do that." And I covered one on my left eye, and no problem seeing out of my right. And then I covered my right eye, and I couldn't see anything out of my left eye. And I realized that's not good.
Like when you say you couldn't see anything, was it just too blurry or was it black or?
It was just like black, yeah, black.
Wow, okay. Wow, that
It
is
was the
very
best that I,
strange.
yeah, the best that I, it was black and gray and kind of just weird. It almost looked like something like out of a Borg ship or something from Star Trek. It was weird. And so they said, you need to go see the doctor about that. And I said, okay, well, today's Christmas. I'll go tomorrow. And they're like, you need to go now. That could be something really serious. And so that started this whole thing where I saw some different specialists and they still couldn't figure out exactly what had happened. And then a couple weeks after that, I it had just all this eye pain started happening, and they thought I was having an eye stroke and sent me to the hospital to get like a stroke workup. And once I was there and they started doing all the diagnostics, they realized that's not what it was, and that I had something called optic neuritis, which means essentially the swelling of the optic nerve.
Wow.
So usually when that happens in about 60% of cases of optic neuritis, they end up finding out that the person has MS. And so that was what my working diagnosis was and currently still is right now. And so I began treatment for that. And they're still not 100% decided on it just yet. They're working some other theories, but at this point in time, that's what I have. So.
Hmm. And but it doesn't seem like it's super affecting you at the moment, though.
The only symptoms that I've had have been the eye. And
Okay.
so they immediately, well, after they kind of finally settled on a diagnosis, they started infusion therapy for that. And so I've done that a couple times now, and I think that's stabilized the eye issues.
That's good.
And so, so far, so good in that department. That's one of the reasons they're exploring other theories, is because usually a person with MS has had other symptoms by now. And so they're exploring the possibility that maybe that's not the right diagnosis, but time will tell. They've done what they can do right now to determine it. So I've just got to wait out and see if I develop other symptoms or not.
Would you say that that's a relief to you, or is that still a worry
Um, you
that it
know,
might not
last
be MS?
um, it depends on what it is, right?
Right. I guess so.
But it's, I think one of the things I've learned, I would say it's not a worry anymore. Initially you're kind of shocked at something like that because you go from nothing ever being wrong with you to all of a sudden now I've got these pretty serious things going on. Last year was a really good experience for me. I think a lot of different things happened. I went from having all that happen that I just mentioned to you. After I got out of the hospital for that, I came home and got the flu for 2 weeks, and it's flu is horrible. I've never had it before, and it was crazy. And a couple months after that, I ended up having to get my gallbladder removed
Wow.
in the hospital. And then I got home and recovered from that over the summer, and everything seemed to be going pretty well. And then my eye started having issues again, and I had to get that looked at. And then not too long before that, I had to get my appendix taken out.
You just had it all at once.
Had all at once, yeah, it was. So, and then after my appendix got taken out later on in October, all the COVID came into our home, and I got COVID and had to deal with that as well. And so this year has definitely, or this past year has had its share of challenges. And I think, from my personal perspective, I feel like God was really preparing me, just using the circumstances that happened in my life to just continue to prepare me for what was to come next. And so, in some ways, it was a little bit laughable. I remember being in the emergency room with the doctor when he came to me about the appendix. And he said, "Well, it could be your appendix. We're going to get some imaging." And I said, "It can't be the appendix, right?" Because he knew a little bit about my history, because you have to tell them all that stuff. And he came in with the results, and he looked at me, and I laughed, and he kind of was almost laughing with me, because I was like, of course it is. Of course my appendix is, because that's how this year's going right now. And so in light of all that happening with me, even thinking about what was happening with the world, I was realizing that, things don't always go the way that we expect or the way that we hope. And a lot of it has to do with the way you choose to look at your circumstances and look at the world around you, and the way
Perspective.
that you choose, yeah, perspective, and the way that you choose to talk about things and communicate about things with people. I would have had every excuse last year to just sit and have a little pity party for myself and say, look at all these things that happened to me, and oh, me, and I'm just this poor person that has everything bad happen to them. Or I could have said, you know what, I just trust and know that there's a purpose in all of this, and that perhaps I'm these circumstances are being used to shape me and to grow me, and I'm going to grow through these, and I'm going to make a choice to use these
Mm,
for the betterment of myself and my family, and maybe those even around me, so that maybe I can be a little more empathetic and sympathetic to people around me who are struggling with health things that maybe I not that I wasn't sensitive to, in the sense that I wanted to ignore it, but maybe just never thought about because I never had to.
right.
And so forth. And I think it's opened up a little bit of a new world for me there. I can be a little more understanding of people struggling with different things, and want to reach out to them and see if they need assistance and help, and to understand what that might be like.
I think that humans have the really cool like capacity to understand other people's struggles and empathize with them, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole nother like layer when you actually go through it yourself, and
Yes.
you can't have the same exact feeling towards a situation that you haven't gone through, because once you go through it, or once you go through something like it, then you understand a little bit better, more than you realized beforehand, because it feels like I can listen to someone going through what you've gone through, and I can understand and I can empathize with you, but it would be a whole other thing if I was actually in your situation, and I can't even imagine, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I can. It's what's beautiful about it though is the amount of things that, you're always, like I said, you're always growing and learning. And so maybe in the moment you might not realize everything that you're being taught and everything that you're learning through those circumstances. But I can look back through my life and just see how God made me who I am to prepare me for the life that was ahead of me.
mm,
and and so you talked about the counseling and things like that. And I wonder, I, I was a particular, maybe being a middle child, as you noted earlier. I sat back and watched my sisters growing up, because I was too busy kind of just staying out of it and observing things. And I used to just be real quiet and shy, and I wanted to watch and just look at people. And I just learned a lot from watching people. And, those are all skills that are really much needed when you become a counselor, that you're able to just observe and listen and watch people. And then being a parent, of course, those skills are very valuable as well, and a wife, and then in any other facet of life that you're in. I mean, most people want to be heard and listened to, and they want to be able to talk with you and to dialogue with you. And um, I'm grateful for those, and I'm grateful for the experience in counseling that helped me even be prepared for all the things that were happening in my own family and with myself. So,
I think that most people are absolutely willing to have dialogues with each other, but I feel like for whatever reason, and I don't know if this is a new thing or if it's always been this way, it's it's really difficult to put yourself in a situation where you can have those particular conversations. You know, it feels like the general taboo is you're not supposed to talk about religion and politics with your family because it's going to end. It very likely could end in an argument that could make your relationships rougher. And then, but with the way society's gone, it does feel like that even if we're willing to have those conversations, we're not having the conversations, and then it ends up the only times we ever have them, it ends up as an argument. Um, that's what it feels like to me. Um,
yeah,
on the topic of God, then, I would take it that if I asked you, do you believe in God, you would say yes.
absolutely, yes.
And you are part of a church, and what denomination is that?
It's the Presbyterian Church of America, the PCA.
Hmm. Um, Presbyterian is, I don't know the specifics on most denominations, but Presbyterian is different in what way, maybe? Is it
So
just like,
it's a Christian church, a gospel, teaching, believing church. I think what distinguishes perhaps, if different denominations have different things that distinguish them, like you just said. I think what would distinguish, we would consider ourselves what we call a Reformed church. So if you go back to like the Protestant Reformation, there were some principles set forth, like Martin Luther and some others. And the church is what our church would say is that since that time, the church has kind of gotten away from some of those core teachings and principles that were set forth based on scripture. And we just kind of want to go back to that to make sure that we're staying true to kind of God's word and what God's, set forth through that. And so the Presbyterian, I'm sorry, go ahead if you want to.
no, the Presbyterian, what were you saying?
Oh, and so the Presbyterian Church, like our particular denomination, would say that basically we value strong teaching in the church, and when you go from church to church within that denomination, you can usually expect that the same things are kind of being taught, and you're not walking into a church that you have to completely figure out from the bottom up because you kind of know that they've agreed to those same kind of teachings as well. um, it it has to do, this is where it would get a little controversial, which you might enjoy for the discussion's sake. It has more of a Calvinistic, so more of a approach to its teaching, which is a little bit more saying, for example, we do things like infant baptism, and we also do we believe in predestination
I see.
and things as well. So that distinguishes us a little bit more.
Well,
But on the
those are interesting conversations to have in their own
uh,
right. Infant
absolutely, yes.
baptism is one that I would say, I'm not that I'm Christian anymore, but I would say even as a Christian, I never didn't really understand. Um, to you, does it take away a little bit of the meaning behind baptism as an outspoken, uh, you know, I am Christian and I'm going through this traditional thing to express my Christianity to the world? Does it take that away when you are baptized as an infant?
Actually, I would say it does just the opposite. I think it increases the value of your faith because I think that Christian church, other Christian churches have kind of borrowed from the idea of infant baptism and doing what they consider dedicating their children.
But yeah, that
So,
seems more of like just a, I wanted the church to, everyone to look at and see that I
yeah,
had a child. That doesn't really seem like the same kind of thing though
but
to me.
no, well, I'm not, no, I would agree. It's not
Right.
the same thing. But I think actually that flowed from infant baptism, where some
I
people
see.
didn't agree with infant baptism and decided, let's do this instead, kind of a thing. But
That makes sense.
infant baptism is more of a parent saying, I confess Christ, and I believe in him, and I believe in him such that I know that he's going to do a work in my child. And so I'm going to raise my child as a Christian in the belief that my child will eventually make a profession in faith to him. And so you baptize your child. Um, I think we would say that the difference is in uh, we're not saying we hope that one day this is going to happen. We're saying we are confident that God is going to do a work at one point in time. And there's a little more to it than that. I'm kind of keeping it kind of simplistic, but
Right.
it would
Um,
require a much deeper.
if I became a Presbyterian and I went to
Mhm.
your specific church, would I have been baptized? But if I hadn't been baptized, would I be baptized at that church as to become a member to fully dedicate myself to your church?
No, you wouldn't be required to baptize your child to
No,
become a
no,
member.
myself to become
Oh,
baptized
to
at your church.
yourself.
Yes,
Oh no, you wouldn't have to be baptized at that point if you've already been baptized.
if I
They
hadn't
wouldn't.
been.
They would. If you hadn't been, they wouldn't have required you to become. They wouldn't have required you to be baptized either. You could become a member if you, um, to become a member, you have to you have to, of course, profess Christ because we're
Right.
agreeing to that we believe in the same things. But they would, I think they would encourage you that baptism was something that would be something that God teaches about, but they would wait for you to come to that conclusion on your own and to be ready to do that.
But
They wouldn't.
I guess my question is, would it be expected that to dedicate myself to God, I would need to be baptized?
I don't know if expected is the right word, but I think at some point they would hope that you would come to that conclusion. Is maybe is the better word.
I guess another way to frame it is: are all the leaders in the church baptized? In a
Yes,
Yeah, in Presbyterian churches.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then that's what I would be kind of. Well, I think that's really interesting though, because as far as infant baptizing and adult baptizing, those are very different animals. Adult baptizing is a very internal and external, like saying, I am a Christian and I'm professing my Christianity to the world. Whereas infant baptizing seems more like parents saying, I am going to raise my child a specific way, but it seems very much less like a decision by the child themselves.
Right. Well, so that's where the views in baptism are differing because we don't see baptism as it, as convert like something that you do as soon as you're converted, which a lot of other churches do. We see it as a uh, just saying we believe in the promise that you made. We see it similar. It's you could see some parallels perhaps with like circumcision, where the Jewish faith used to do this as a saying, God, we believe in the promise that you've made to us, and so we're doing that. So that you're right in some ways. It's different, but ultimately in the Presbyterian Church, what needs to happen is what you called a I forget there's two different kinds of membership. So when you're a child, you have one kind of membership, and then when you get to a certain age, or not even a certain age, just a certain time in your life where you express an interest in learning more about your faith and that you've understood certain things about your faith and that you want to actively pursue those things, then you change from one kind of a member to another, which indicates that you've now owned that for yourself. So it's not completely different from other denominations in that regard, but we view it quite differently in light of scripture and in other ways.
Interesting. Very interesting. But what do you think
So
about
you still have to at
circumcision?
some point own circumcision. Well, it depends. Like that, I mean, in the Jewish faith, you would see it quite differently
It's
from
required for the Jewish faith, basically.
yeah, yes. But for me, as far as that goes, as far as the analogy of it in scripture, I understand that in relation to what we're talking about. But as far as the actual physical thing, like in the hospital, I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other about it. I mean, we went ahead and did it because we kind of at the time were told that was a good thing to do, but we didn't put
Seems
as
like
a research.
everybody's in that boat.
Yeah, it's
Most
one of
people
those things.
don't really consider it very much. It's just, do you want this to be done? Well, everybody I know had it, so I guess yes.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends who chose not to have their sons circumcised, and they don't seem to
I've
have.
thought about it, and if I have a son, then I won't be circumcising. I think it's not that I'm like upset that I was for sure. It's not like an issue, but at the same time, it's like, do I need to do that? And there's no reason to say that someone needs to do that in the Christian
Right.
faith or otherwise, really. So
Yeah.
besides the Jewish faith for their specific reasons, but I don't agree with the Jewish faith either. So I guess that doesn't matter. What was the other one we were talking about? The other part that we were talking about is the Presbyterian Church.
Predestination?
Predestination. That is a really interesting topic, and that is so
Yes.
complicated that there's no way at all that you can actually come to a conclusion in one conversation.
No, we could not.
So, like a lot of the other topics that I do enjoy talking about, predestination is a big one. I think that it's
Yes.
really interesting to say that because God knows what you're going to choose, that you've been predetermined, or how you're going to live your life, that you're predetermined. Would that be a good explanation of how the Presbyterian Church views
No,
predestination? No, it wouldn't.
no.
Okay, please enlighten me because I don't know enough about it.
I don't know how well I can enlighten. It
Of
is a
course, of
complex,
course, of course.
but it's more that God had a plan before the world even began, and His plan was His plan, and that we are part of that plan. And who are we to sort of question? So we know in Scripture, for example, that God says that all of us are sinful. We're all sinful, and we have all made a choice to go down these paths and so forth. And we're all going to, because we're sinful, we're choosing a path of sin in our lives. And if God chose to reach down and pull us out of that and to redeem us from that, then who are we to say who he should choose and who he shouldn't choose? um, he's the creator, and he's picking us up out of a sinful world where we're eventually, it's leading to death and so forth. And then we get all haughty in ourselves and say, well, why did he choose to save them and not them? Well, we don't understand it, but why did he even choose to save us?
Right.
um, so we don't know. So we look at it as though we don't know anybody, their hearts and what's going on with them and where their faith is and where their beliefs are. And so, as any gospel believing church, we would want to share our faith with others and share the gospel with them and just treat people the way that God's asked us to treat them, which is very loving and
Yeah.
and encouraging and so forth, and not to condemn them for things and not to put them down, like you see, unfortunately, so many people who say they're Christians in this world right now. But so I don't know. It's a I think sometimes when we say that, well, basically, I don't think it would be accurate to say that because God knew what we would do. I think God does what He wants to do anyway,
Mm.
and I don't think we have the power. If at one point in time we think we were a Christian and felt like we really truly believe that, I don't think we have the power to change that.
Right.
Um, I think God kind of meets us where we are, and knows kind of He does know what we're going to believe, but He doesn't make His decisions based on our choices.
Right. So considering predestination, does that so my definition of what it would take to essentially get into the kingdom of heaven as a human on earth would be to fully believe in the death, resurrection, and rebirth, or not rebirth, and rising, essentially, ascension of Jesus Christ, who, in belief that he was 100% human and 100% God as well. Um,
Mhm.
and that belief is what allows you to continue on into the kingdom of heaven. Is that the same in the Presbyterian Church? That is the most important thing in the Christian faith, is what I'm saying.
Um, what I would say is yes, it's a little tricky because the where I would be cautious is just to say that yes, in principle for sure, but it's not. We don't get into heaven because we believe it. We get into heaven because God's chosen to put us there, and decided to do that. And by us believing, we're just acknowledging that we understand that that's what He's doing. But our decision isn't putting us in one place or the other
So
itself. That's
whether or not,
putting the onus back on us. That somehow we have a say in that.
so uh, God very well could accept into heaven someone who had never heard of Christianity before.
No, I wouldn't say that either. Maybe I didn't explain it well enough.
No, no, it's not that you're not explaining it well. I'm just kind of stupid. So, uh,
No, no, I mean, I think you see evidence in people's lives of the work that Christ is doing in them. And I think you, while we can't make a decision, we can't make uh, a judgment on somebody, whether or not they're a believer or not. We can see in how they carry and choose to live out their lives,
right.
whether they're the fruit of Christ in their lives. That doesn't mean that they're not a Christian. It could mean that we're not observing it. But I don't think we would say that somebody who's going around maybe, you know, murdering people, robbing banks,
No, I would
all
never
those
want
things
to see
are,
that to know
yeah,
that that's where they were headed.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
I
right.
mean, obviously, it's not up to me, but it would still be alarming, nevertheless, to know
Right.
that. Uh, could someone who lived well but outwardly said that they were an atheist make it into the kingdom of heaven?
It would depend on how you define live well, right?
Kind of like, you know what I mean, just a regular person who didn't commit any serious crimes
A
but
good
did
person, a
wanton
person
committing
that
serious
seems
crimes
good
but
and
was
so
not
forth.
malicious, right? Exactly. Even in their own mind, they are a good person, just does not believe in God.
Well, I would have to say that probably not, because if they're not willing to acknowledge the person that created them, then why would they even want to go to heaven, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Boy, as far as the options, I feel like everyone wants to go to heaven.
Right, so that's an interesting question, right? Why do people want to go to heaven, and what do they feel like it's this storybook place that they've kind of seen in movies, or what is it in us that makes us want to go to heaven, but yet we don't want to believe in the person who supposedly is the creator and the author and of heaven, and
so,
earth.
let's. What is heaven and hell? Because it feels like Christianity ends up at
Oof.
this place very quickly.
Yeah.
When you're talking from the outside looking into Christianity, it's like, okay, well, why would you want to be a Christian? The obvious answer that you can really lean on is, well, what happens when you die? Um, Christianity believes that some people are going to heaven and some people are going to hell. Probably most people are going to hell as far as the Bible's concerned, and as far as the world looks like if you look outside. But uh, what in your mind is heaven and hell?
Well, I wouldn't say that scripture gives a lot of clarity to what those both really are,
You're right.
except to say that hell is, I know, being eternally separated from God,
Right.
eternally separated from God. And so, what I do know is that whether we believe in God or not on this earth, that uh, He's, for me, from what I've understood Scripture to say, whether or not we believe it, if God is in charge of the earth, and from what I've understood, from what I've read in Scripture and what I've been taught, He is actually preventing as much evil in the world as there could actually be.
You're
And
saying the
so,
world is maximally good already.
I'm
Maximally good.
sorry.
You're saying that the world at the moment would be maximum. Sorry, maximum. I'm so awful with this speaking things. Maximum. I can't even say it.
Maximally.
Maximum. Yeah, thank you. Maximally good. It's as good as it possibly can be, and God is trying his best. Well, not trying his best, is making it that way.
No, I wouldn't say that.
I'm sorry. Putting
What
words
I
in your
would
mouth.
say is that it's better than it's better than it could be. And so
Right.
to imagine, with what we've seen this past year and how awful a lot of those things have been, to imagine that 100-fold, um, you know, and hell is far worse than even that. To be separated from God and to not know what that love is and what that means to live under the care of a mighty and powerful God. Um, that seems pretty awful to me. And if it's even far worse than that, then it's unimaginable. And heaven, on the other hand, is to be forever with our Creator in His care and His love. And I don't know if that's a specific place, if that's going to be on a new earth, or what that is going to look like. But, to be with the Heavenly Father who created me, be able to spend the rest, my life after death with Him, and
Do you believe that that would be
opposite of what,
eternity?
yeah, in eternity. I mean, that would be beautiful. And I don't believe because that's what I'm going to get out of it. I believe in
Sure.
God. I've seen His work in my life and over the years, His hand and all the things that He's done, and that's just sort of the icing on the cake kind of a thing.
Right. Um, I guess one of the things that I've been hung up on when it comes to heaven and hell, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it sounds like you do believe that you are going to be you, uh, your own consciousness in heaven with Him. Maybe your body would be different, but you are you. You know what I mean? Like you are you, and you're going to see your family who are in heaven with you,
Well, I
just
don't
in the
know.
same as
I don't know all of. Yeah, I know that for sure that my spirit will be there, and we're told we're going to get new bodies. But what does that mean? I don't know.
would
And
you be? Do you
as
think
far
that
as
you'll
seeing our
recognize your family who go there with you?
as far as family goes, I think there's unfortunately scripture doesn't really say that we're going to be able to know our family when we go. We could, but it doesn't necessarily promise or guarantee that.
Well,
I think,
do you think
yeah.
that
Go ahead.
you'll be an individual as well as enveloped by God, essentially in heaven? You'll still be you, a person, an individual.
I think yeah, I mean he made me and he made us all unique and individuals for sure. So I would imagine that that would come with us, but I would also imagine that we would be of the same mind in some ways, not physically of the same mind, but
In some ways,
we're
probably, you know, connected on some
but
level beyond what we're
yeah, but
able
I'm
to.
not thinking like all sci-fi-ish and stuff like that. but
Well, you're right. It's yeah,
but like that I think
yeah. Assuming
yeah.
also your husband goes to heaven as well. Do you think that you'd recognize him as as who he is, as your husband from
I don't
heaven?
know. I'd like to be able to, but I don't know that that's going to, happen or not. I just know that if we're going to be with our creator, that probably won't matter. It's a comfort to me on this earth to know that my husband believes in Christ and that my family members know who Christ is and that they love him. But I don't know what that's going to look like afterwards.
Um, is God truth?
Absolutely.
And you'd be one with God. You'd be enveloped by it, or through and through be part of God.
No, I don't know that it's guaranteed that we're part of God.
Well, it sounds like if hell is to be not with God, then the opposite of that would be heaven is with God of some sort.
Yeah, but being with God and being one with God, or being, I'm not sure exactly
Of
what,
course. Well,
sorry, and being
well, as
part of God might be distinct, still just like, for example,
if you ask God a question, he could answer if he wanted to.
sure, but like there's a distinction even in scripture between God and the angels, even though the angels do what God wants to do and they follow him, there's still a distinction between the two. So I wouldn't ever want to say that I'm one with God in that regard. So maybe I just didn't understand what you're saying.
Well, I'm curious as to what the answers of Christianity especially is to what is heaven like and what is hell like. That's a question that even Christians have themselves, which is a really good question to ask, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things in scripture that talks about it, like, where, but it's not necessarily with a physical description of what those things are like. Uh,
So it's
but
up to interpretation.
um, yeah, I think that's where we're also cautioned in scripture to be careful how we
Yeah.
interpret things as well. So I think sometimes in scripture, when things are not described or not shared with us, that there's an intentionality behind that, that maybe we don't need to know that, or maybe it would not be good for us to know that because um, of what we might do with it. So, for example, like one of the things they say in scripture is not to make any images of God, any false images. And people harmlessly trying to, paint pictures and things of Christ, unfortunately, has caused all kinds of craziness in the world too, because people say, well, why do you make Christ with blonde hair and blue eyes? He
Yeah,
was
for
probably
sure.
Eastern.
He
He
was
should have
there
brown
in
hair and
Easter.
Urcos, Right, and then people say, well, how do you know that's what he looked like when he was in the Middle East? And so this big debate and argument over what Jesus looked like, and it's sort of defeating the purpose. Like,
Yeah,
who cares what he looked like? It's what he did.
right.
If you had to guess what he looked like, of course, that's probably more of what he looked like. But why is that so important? And then, at the college I went to for my bachelor's, Biola, they had this huge mural that somebody had painted of Christ. It was beautiful, and you could appreciate it for the work that somebody put into it. But it became an issue on campus because the students who were black said, "Well, wait a second, is that what my God looks like too?" And so you're like, "Well, okay, wait a
Nope.
second. Maybe the reason Scripture didn't give a physical description of what Christ looked like is because we weren't supposed to know."
Yeah. From memory, I think it basically said he looks average.
Yeah, I mean,
Something
people
along
weren't
those
looking at
lines.
him when you read about him and people meeting him. They don't sound like they're going like, "Oh, whoa,"
Yeah,
like
he's just so beautiful. I've never heard that description of Jesus.
right. So I think when we're trying to interpret even like what heaven and hell is like, I think we just have to be careful with that because there's just so much that we don't know. It does talk about heaven being a place where there's no more sadness, no more grieving, no more death, no more, those kinds of things. And I mean, to me, that just paints a beautiful picture as well.
It does. It does.
But it also talks about, God being righteous and holy and so forth and all kinds of things. And you see these images. I don't know if you then the temple, that description was it with which prophet was it? I'll have to. My mind is lately not remembering all these. I'm
It's
horrible
me
with
all the time.
um, where he goes into the temple and the prophet is saying like my lips are unclean and he touches a coal to his lips because the picture that he gets is that Christ just fills this temple and this place and the angels that are in there, the seraphs themselves, have to cover their faces and they have to cover their feet because of how beautiful and how holy he is. And trying to imagine based on those kinds of imagery, that kind of imagery and descriptions of who he is, like, I don't know if I should be even trying to imagine what that's like. And Moses, he
Well,
has
isn't
to see
is
God.
that
And
isn't
so,
that a question? You're saying that some questions shouldn't be asked, or are you saying that some questions shouldn't be answered?
no, I mean, I don't think it hurts to consider what those places are like. And I think it doesn't hurt to look at scripture and kind of try and, if you're curious about it, to try and determine what that looks like. But I think there's limited information. And at a
Of course.
certain point, some people can spend their lives studying those kinds of things um, and still not find the answers. And so at some point, you have to kind of say, I don't know. And maybe that's okay that I don't know
Mm,
exactly what that is and what that looks like. And
I
so,
think I don't know is a totally acceptable answer.
absolutely. So that's what I shared with you is probably about as much as I know. And
um,
it's extremely limited.
right, right. Um, not to point fingers, but I would like to be a little minorly intense for just a moment. Um,
Okay.
that concerns me, not because I think that you're doing it wrong. I think that it's really concerning how how much people believe this
Mhm.
sort of thing, and how not thoroughly dedicated they are to studying the religion itself. And I'm not saying that that's unique to you or anyone. It's in fact it kind of seems like human nature on some level. But uh, ramifications of Christianity are wide reaching, and it really does concern me that so much misinformation seems to come from very religious people, especially in terms of scientific studies and uh, their treatment of the homosexual community in general. Even if it's not, you know, treating someone poorly is not part of the religion, it does seem like more often than not someone who's homophobic or not doesn't like gay people tends to be on a religious basis. Um, I'm not sure where you stand on homosexuality, but I would assume it's not supported by the church, and therefore it is a sin like any other. Would that be
Uh,
correct?
well, scripture indicates that clearly, yes.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
would say that clearly that the Christianity does not support homosexuality in any form, and it will never.
not if it believes in scripture. No.
Right, exactly. I think that's scary.
Well, so you
what
have.
what would
This
you
is
say
where.
about?
Okay.
I'm sorry, and this is
No,
different.
you go
So
ahead.
please, anytime you feel like you want to jump in, I'm not trying to be
No,
step on
I
your
want to let
toes or
you
anything.
talk too. So I want you to.
It,
I want you to finish what
um,
you're saying. So.
homosexuality is a really interesting one because of all the things that the Bible teaches, of all the lovely, lovely stories where God's chosen people end up prevailing in the end, and God's chosen people are lovely people and live for such wonderful things. It does seem very specific on saying that, without beating around it, anything having to do with anal sex is worthy of damnation, which is very interesting to me, because especially with things like predestination, excuse me, um, that would say that every homosexual person would end up in hell, every single one. Would you say that that's true as far as the Protestant, or as far as the church is concerned?
Well, if you're looking just specifically at that thing, but I would just make a point here that usually whenever the word homosexual is talked about in scripture,
Mm-hmm.
it's talked about the sexually immoral. So it's usually grouped together with people who are idolaters, adulterers, heterosexuals who are practicing
Murderers.
outside marriage, and things like that as well.
Mm.
So I think people are all too quick to point out the homosexual part of it, but not the other things, enslavers, liars, perjurers,
Of
and
course.
things like
Of course. It
that.
puts them in the sexually immoral, which is directly put next to murderers, thieves, and cheats,
Right. So
things like
just
that.
just to be mindful of the context too. So it's not. I think a lot of times people feel like, and partly because the church has done that. I think in a lot of ways, some of the church say has really made a point. So for example, one thing that stands out for me is years ago, I forget and this is just a name thing. It has nothing to do with the group of people. I forget my own kids' names too easily. Um,
You've
was
got
it
so many.
Matthew Shepard? Maybe it was the one that the homosexual man that was killed by somebody because they hated homosexuals.
Ooh, awful.
I think that's what it was. And his family was having a funeral service for him. And across the street from the cemetery, there were people like protesting and
St.
shouting off.
Westboro?
I'm horrible with those kinds of names. I
I
wish
think
I
it
could
might
remember.
be Westboro Baptist Church, and maybe
Yeah, and I don't know which church it was, but
God hates
yeah,
FAGs.
yeah, I just thought that was awful. Like,
Awful.
it
Awful.
doesn't
Doesn't
matter
show
why
love.
a person's killed. It doesn't show any kind of love at all. You don't do those kinds of things.
No.
So for me, what I said at the beginning is we're all sinners, and so there's a place in scripture where God condemns every single sinful act that there is, and I am guilty just as much as anybody else. So who am I to go to a homosexual person and condemn them for what they're doing? I would not tell them that what they're doing is right, but on the other hand, I wouldn't say that the things that I have done are right either. So I wouldn't go to them as a holier than thou person, judging them for the things
Of
that they're
course.
doing.
Of
I would
course.
want to love them and to be nice with them, be friend. I believe that most good conversations come from connections, from friendships and relationships with people, and I would want to have that kind of an
Personal
an
connection with them.
person with someone. So I wouldn't be standing, and I've not wanted intentionally to be on the side of anybody holding a sign,
Or
condemning another, because I don't think that facilitates that kind of interaction.
right.
So
Um, that being said, and that is a lovely thing to point out, if they asked you, "Am I going to hell for loving my husband?" If this is a man, you would say yes. That is a sign that they would be going to hell.
yeah, if they directly asked me that,
Of
yes.
course, right? Um,
But I would also point out that I would be going to hell otherwise
yeah,
as well.
but even if they accepted Presbyterian Church in every way, as long as they were married together, that they would not be accepted into the kingdom of God.
It's not the marriage part that is the sin. It's the act of homosexuality that's the sin.
So you would vote in the positive for gay marriage if it came up again.
No, I just don't want to confuse the issue. Like, marriage was created to be a good thing. Marriage was created by God,
Between a man and
uh,
a woman.
between a man and a woman, yes. And so it was a good thing to be done between a man and a woman. But the act of getting married is not necessarily sinful. It's what they're doing. And essentially, I think we get confused too, where we think, well, what you were just go ahead and use the example you shared, the anal sex. Um, I think we get confused with thinking it's just the
Sodomy.
act, the physical act itself that is what's the the thing that's going to keep them from going to heaven. It's not because they go, "Hey, I want to do this physical act with you," but whenever the physical act that you're describing, sodomy or whatever, is being done, essentially it's blatantly saying to God in His face that this is what you've said is good for me, and I'm choosing to do just the opposite of it. So it's really a rebellion against what God has sort of ordained for people to be doing. And so that's the sinful part of it. Whenever somebody decides to cheat on their spouse, they're saying, God, what you've said is not good. And so I'm going to do my own thing, my own way. And that's against it. Whenever I choose to, have sex outside of marriage, if I chose to do that, which of course would not be the case now because I'm married, but if if those things happen, you're choosing to basically go in the face of God and say, what you've asked for us to do is wrong, and I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing. That's the ultimate sin. And so homosexuality is just a form of that. It's an interesting thing because up until this point in history, why do people choose to identify themselves by their sexualities? Like why do
Either
we
a
walk?
positive or a negative. I mean,
I'm heterosexual or homosexual. Yeah, I
it's
mean,
either
why?
I think it's either true or
Okay.
not true, right? You either are
Yeah, it's
attracted to
yeah.
the same
So
sex or you're not.
so I don't know. I think it sometimes becomes kind of a distraction. It could be whether you say you're identifying yourself as heterosexual, homosexual. Like
Um,
from a spiritual perspective, it doesn't really matter what labels we give to ourselves. It matters what we do and don't do that God has asked us to do.
uh, I I don't know if this is the right thing to come to a conclusion of, but would the Presbyterian Church be open to supporting a gay marriage inside the church itself, like in the building by a Presbyterian church leader? That would be acceptable,
No, it wouldn't.
right? So it's not acceptable to act out homosexuality.
No, it's not. I mean,
But
I did I
is
not say that
okay
before? I
to
just want to be sure.
without let's assume that someone is attracted to both men and women. Let's say in this case a man, uh, and that person decides never to act out on the homosexual tendencies, and then ends up marrying a woman. Um, uh, should is the act of being attracted to men a sin in and of itself?
That is a very good question. And I think from discussions that I've heard and teachings, there's not a lot of teaching on that. Obviously, it's a newer issue to the church, as far as it being
Well,
about
about
in
the
that
past
way.
century, but
I,
yeah.
well, I mean, newer, not homosexuality in general, but whether or not, the issue with regard to
Right.
how attraction and things like that. They like the church just never had those discussions before, right? So
Well,
that's what I mean.
I think that it doesn't have them often, but it has had them.
Yeah. So for example, I guess I would say I would think that a person, so for example, a heterosexual person who, let's say, one of the issues that men sometimes struggle with is pornography, which might be a whole nother issue.
Especially nowadays.
Yes, within the church. But so if a man in the church could say, look, this is something that I'm struggling with, and I really would like some help and direction in this, or I'm just struggling with this and I'm working through it, and the church can accept a person for that issue, I think the church certainly has had, I think, some discussion, and definitely in the past several years, about what that means for homosexuality as well. And I believe you can say that I'm attracted to men, and this is something that I'm not sure about, or that I'm struggling with, or that I just want to know more about. And I believe that the church should, and that the church that I go to does believe in having anybody who has those struggles be a part of the church and be a part of the discussion and so forth.
Hmm.
I
Do you
would
think that?
encourage you if you want to know. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'd encourage you if you want to know a little bit more about that. One of the we've had some people who've come up through who've what they would say, maybe you wouldn't necessarily see this the same way, but who say that they were homosexuals or lesbians, and they came out of that, gay, lesbian, whatever the lifestyle is, and they have come to faith in Christ, and they've talked about their experience and what that was like. And some pretty avid homosexuals, these aren't people who just said, well, I thought I was for a year or two and now I've changed my mind. These are people who were blatantly in the lifestyle, and really felt very strongly against it, and they've changed their minds. It'd be interesting for you to maybe see their perspective on kind of
Sure.
coming.
A good
Like
perspective would be nice to hear.
there's a woman by the name of Rosaria Butterfield who's written a lot of work. She actually was a scholar, a professor at I forget which school it was. And she pretty much was like, yeah, I'm going to get these, I'm going to do a book about Christians and, how hateful they are and so forth against lesbian or, the gay community, the homosexual community in general. And decided to take it upon herself to do some research on it. And what she did was she actually sat in a car in front of a church and she just observed people going in and out for a while. And then she kind of slowly kind of made her way, moved to the parking lot, and then she decided to go into the church, and she writes about her experiences in the church itself. And what she encountered was maybe different than what you might expect. And it's very interesting to hear her talk about it. And she's a pretty good spokesperson for that particular thing that you're talking about, like where people who come in the church who have those kinds of things, like, well, I'm attracted to people of the same sex. And she shares a lot of her experience and how we can love people who are in that place, and how we go about talking to them. And one of the things, just to give you a sense of that, she shared that what she encountered was she thought she was going to get hostility and she was going to get kicked out of the church and that they were going to send her away. But instead, she was welcomed into people's homes and welcome to have conversations with people about it. And years later, she ended up marrying a pastor, and she's now a pastor's wife, which surprises her to death. And she has a very good perspective on that community, and how to work with them and how to interact and to engage people in those discussions. And so it's
Would she
I
still
think
consider herself a lesbian, meaning that she only enjoys those
no,
same
but
activities
I
as women?
but she's written about still struggling with some maybe not as much as the years have passed by, but for a while struggling with the same sex attraction, even once she started kind of becoming a believer and coming to a faith in Christ. So
Hmm.
she's still struggling with that same sex attraction. So she would say that yes, it's okay to be a believer and still struggle with those things as well. So
Um,
it
as far as
a lot of education for people like that. So
as far
go
as
ahead.
predestination goes, then would it be safe to assume that God never intended her to be a lesbian, and He only ever intended her to maybe be bisexual if there was a term applied to it because she married a man and was happy with that relationship, assuming
Um,
that she was happy
well,
with him
that
as
goes,
well, because
I don't know. I
that
think
wouldn't
that
be a
goes too
problem.
far. I think
Oh,
that goes
okay.
too far. I think God would just, I think what I would just
No,
say
I'm
is
talking
that,
about heaven and hell when predestination.
oh, I'm sorry, maybe repeat the question for me.
Well, because she married a man, as far as predestination goes, that would assume that she was always going to marry a man, right? Because God
Oh, well,
foreknew
you're,
that she was going to.
um,
Like that was set in stone that she was going to live, uh, become a pastor's wife essentially, and then she would, when she passes away, she'll enter the kingdom of heaven with him because he knew that.
I mean, I guess you could sort of say that, but I mean, yeah, I don't think it's a
But you wouldn't call her
little too
now like
simplistic of a thing, but yeah. I don't know that she would identify herself that way anymore, but I think she would definitely say that that was a very real struggle for her
is
from a very young age.
is uh, is a 2020, and this is just a way to, is a 2020 homosexual person, meaning that they're through and through only attracted to same sex partners. Um, is that a possibility in humans, or is that not a thing that happens?
Is what a possibility? I'm
Not
sorry.
ever being attracted to someone of the same or of the opposite sex, only ever being attracted to someone of the same sex.
I don't know. I mean,
Because
I don't
that
think
would that
anybody
would
can answer that question, right?
it would be a really, I think that a lot of people can answer that question actually, and there's a lot of communities around, gay.
Well, you're making, well, I don't think anybody can rightly answer that question.
I don't think that anyone can answer
That
it
you're going to
for the
only,
whole society, but I think individuals can say yes, I'm only interested in men, or I'm only interested in women.
well, but you were making a statement as far as that being always, that would
I'm saying
always
is
be
it
the
possible that
case.
someone only is attracted to men, or someone is only attracted to women being of the same
Well, I
sex?
suppose anything's possible, right?
Do you think that that's unfair, considering what marriage is to you and I, to for God to do that to a homosexual person and essentially say that you will never have the same connection as these other people in your entire lifetime. In fact, it's a sin for you even to consider it.
Well, I don't think God made that person. So this is where you might get into more of this, what people consider the science of it, but I don't think that God made a person to be homosexual. That would go against what he put in
But
scripture.
he did make them to be heterosexual.
I would say that was that's what he's indicated in scripture has been his intention. And when he created people, he created them to be husband and wife.
Yeah, I think that that is what the Christianity would say. I think that, to if you're talking terms, everyone would essentially kind of be born into what I would call what known as asexuality, because no one as a child is sexual, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing, especially before puberty. That's not
Mhm.
something that you want in children. Up until 18, that's not even a question. I don't want that to be around in their life. Um, but that means that we all develop a certain amount of sexuality. But I would say that that would put heterosexuality in the same boat, because we're not none of us are sexual beings upon birth. That would mean that we all develop something. Would you agree that not that a 2-year-old is not heterosexual?
Well, that I think that's an ongoing debate. I would think that if God created us and if we're looking at scripture as our guide, that he created us to be male and female, husband and wife later on, and so forth, that I believe that he, in part, I mean, I don't deny that there is an environmental influence on that, but I would say that there definitely is an innate biological aspect to that as well
I would
in
agree
how
with
he
that.
created
Yeah.
us. So I would think that if that's how he said he created us, I tend to believe what he says in his word, which would be that that's how he created us. That doesn't mean that the influence of sin hasn't come into our lives and into the world around us and caused us to have different views on those kinds of things.
Mm. So it mistrue or
or for
non
biology itself to be influenced by sin.
right. You think that's an interesting one. I don't know if I agree with you there. I don't think that sin would affect biology necessarily.
Influenced everything that God created. So it influenced not just our physical bodies, but it influenced the world. Like we have pollution, we have other things. So why couldn't sin have kind of made an impact on our own biology as well?
um, I guess at the end of the day, this is most likely in most conversations going to be a degree to disagree. I think
Yeah.
that it's a lot of soul searching to understand why God would essentially say that this specific sexuality is not allowed. I think that that's something that I'll never understand, but I'll will continue to try to figure that one out. Why an almighty being would be very interested in that. It makes sense in biological terms as far as passing on genetic material to keep the line going. That makes sense. But I'm not so sure it makes sense as far as yeah, you guys can go to heaven, but this one, no, 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 you can't do that. That's not allowed. I like to think because most of his rules would be pretty simple as far as don't lie, cheat, and steal, and kill. Those are really obvious reasons why you're not supposed to do that. Especially telling the truth. That is another big one. Of course, you're only supposed to tell the truth, no lies. Um, I think that sodomy is one that I do not understand why anyone could say that that is worthy of damnation, and I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Let me ask you a couple questions. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I would love questions.
Okay. So if, you're looking at the specific act of sodomy there, but
Yeah, the
what about, yeah,
technical stuff
yeah.
is what I'm interested in.
So, but I've kind of shared with you earlier that it's not just the act itself that I think is the issue here at hand. I think it's that it kind of flies in the face of the very creation that God kind of made and what his intentions for it were.
Can we talk
But
about creation?
what, yeah, but what do you think about, people who have sex outside of marriage or people who are married and have affairs or, commit adultery and things
Well,
like that? What do you think of
affairs is
that?
pretty simply obviously no one could ever accept that. You made a promise with someone, regardless of your religious circumstances.
Mhm.
You said, "I'm going to be with you and only you," and if you break that rule, then you are liable more than just divorce. Is what I'm saying. That
Right.
if
Uh-huh.
something bad happens, if let's say you get a divorce and you lose your friend group, that's just you kind of deserve that. You should have worked it out as best you could outside of course, abuse. That one we don't need to that's really
Right.
complicated. But that would probably be a situation. Maybe divorce is necessary, but that's again an exception to
Sure.
the rule. Outside of that, you need to make it work as best you can. We're all just humans, and there's no reason that you can't.
Okay.
As far as punishment for that, I think that most of the punishment is going to be internal. Uh, Knowing that your marriage failed is a rough thing to go through, and I hope that I never have to go through it. And I hope that no one in my life ever has to go through that. But I know that half of marriages in America are fail, which is
Unfortunately, yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
over half now, like 54% or something like that. And it's absolutely sad because I'm just like, you guys, you not saying that I know better. I'm 25 and stupid, but uh, you guys, the answer is pretty clear, and that's don't don't divorce, work it out. There's no reason and once you get a divorce, the odds are that you're gonna either want to marry again or at least have more relationships. Uh, I kind of doubt that it's gonna be a different situation in the next marriage. I don't know.
Mhm.
As far as punishment goes, I don't think that that's worth damnation. Is what I'm saying. Divorce. I'm sorry. Did I not
Okay.
answer the question very well?
No, no, no. You answered part of it. What about I don't know if you're of the same belief or not, but what about premarital sex?
I think the only thing stopping anyone from having sex before marriage is religion. And so if you believe in religion, then of course you shouldn't do it. If you have a creed that says don't do it, then you're kidding yourself breaking that rule. If you know that the answer is not that, and you do it anyway, then I don't know what to say to you. You broke your own rule. If you don't believe that that's that that's a
Hmm.
sin, then I don't know how you could actually say that it is outside of a religious sensibility. I
Okay.
don't see how a person who is not Christian or not Islamic or Jewish or any sort of religion that says you're not supposed to, I don't see how you can get to that answer without some sort of religion. So yes, it's acceptable as long as your creed doesn't say that it's not acceptable.
Okay. So you're consistent there, eh, with regard to like, because for me, I guess I just feel badly that so many people in the Christian community, or at least people that call themselves Christians, because there are people who call themselves Christians that do not practice really the tenets of Christianity, and so I there are those people, but there are plenty of people who are who do share those beliefs, but have these awful things. And what I would just say to that is that there's a lot of we're all works in progress. People are come from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of teachings, and sometimes some really bad teachings and trainings and so forth. And I think we all have to continue to grow and change out of those. I wish some people would be more quiet about beliefs if they're still working on them and trying to sort through them and so forth. But my teaching has always been that you know whenever there's a person who's been caught in sinful things, you don't condemn them, you don't judge them, you don't get in their face and make them feel like horrible people because they've done, the unspeakable thing, that you just acknowledge that, like, so I think one of the things our pastor talks about a lot in church is, when you read passages of scripture, like the stories that you're talking about, where God will have one group of people kind of fight against another group of people, and the other group of people were these horrible people who did these horrible things, and therefore God judged them, and they're dead now, and woohoo, look at those people. But he always also points out, so whenever God says those things, you realize that the person he wants you to connect with are not the people that actually fought on the good side. The people he wants you to connect with are the people that are being destroyed, because he wants you to remember that you yourself are just like those people. And that you got to put, basically we have to put ourselves in the shoes of others, and not to and to just be mindful of the fact that we're just as guilty as anybody else of anything. And so even I would say that some of the arguments that you're making, while I certainly appreciate where you're coming from on some of them, I would never say that God would ever condemn a person to hell strictly because of the sin of homosexuality. So, a person who's homosexual, even if you threw that particular issue out of the picture, there is plenty that each of us does completely on our own that is worthy of hell, regardless of our sexual preferences. So, yes, he does point that particular thing out, and I know that's what you have a concern with. Um, but he also points out idolaters. He also points out fornicators and adulterers and all kinds of other things. So I don't think the Bible's picking on homosexuals and condemning them to hell because they're homosexual. I think the Bible is condemning sin in general, and it's condemning the practice of sin, regardless of what it is.
Mm,
And I think that regardless of our sexuality and our practicing of our sexuality, I lie, I've cheated, I've hated people in my heart and done all kinds of things that I shouldn't have done that condemn me to hell regardless. So it's a little bit of a false argument to say that God's somebody to
so
hell
I,
just
I
because they're homosexual. We'd go to hell regardless of that.
I think that that is a valid point. I think that the problem with that is though is that although I believe is ultimately the truth, that it's not really important as far as can you get into the kingdom of heaven and be homosexual. I think that the point is uh, Christianity is even especially it seems like Presbyterianism doesn't support even the act of being married in the first place. In fact, I would consider that the Presbyterian Church agrees that any homosexual person to get married actually didn't get married. So it strikes me as odd that the people in the Presbyterian Church would say that yes, homosexuality is not the final, is not really important as far as getting the kingdom of heaven, but also you can't get married here. We're not going to let you. We don't allow that.
Okay, well, first, let me say
That
I'm not a
seems a little bit.
spokesperson for.
Of
I'm
course,
not a
of course,
spokesperson for the Presbyterian Church,
of course.
so I
You're
want
the
to
only
clear
Presbyterian that I've
clearly
ever talked to about Presbyterianism, so that's why I'm
yeah,
making that connection.
yeah. But so repeat that what you just said one more time
So
again.
I think that most people probably agree with you that it's not important as far as getting to the kingdom of heaven, except for the church leaders who would say that no, we're not going to allow homosexual marriage in the church. In fact, we're not even going to recognize that homosexual marriage happened at all, because Christians believe that marriage is only official essentially if it was ordained by someone who was ordained by God, right? So
Okay,
you have to
yeah.
be a member of a Christian religion to marry two people together as a union, or at least some. Or there are circumstances where maybe you could say that that isn't the case, like if you're stranded on an island together and you really want to be married, and you say, well, there's no one here to marry us, so we're married as far as God's concerned. That would make sense. But as far as because
Right.
we have access to ministers, we need their approval to officialize our marriages.
Well, yes and no. Okay, so that's where I want to qualify a little bit. So, I mean, so so if a homosexual couple came into the church and wanted to be a part of the church, we wouldn't say, well, you can say that you're married, but we're not going to acknowledge that.
But
we
you wouldn't
wouldn't
allow
do
them to
that.
marry there, right? You wouldn't allow them to
If a
marry in that church
homosexual couple came to a pastor and said, we want you to marry us,
or any official in the church, really,
yeah, I don't think any church would at this. I mean,
at this
I
point.
guess there are some churches that say that, but let me say most churches would say that Scripture does not allow me to marry people, but they would be speaking from Scripture, not just kind of their own accord. Um, and and I don't think like
It kind of
I just want to
sounds.
be real careful with that. Like,
Yeah, of
I
course.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I
It
just want to be more careful because I think
Yes, of course,
sometimes
of
it's
course.
really easy
It kind of sounds
to
like
box
you're
things.
you're saying that it doesn't matter, but also we're still not going to act like it doesn't matter. It sounds
Well,
like it doesn't matter,
I'm trying
but
to
when
be.
it comes down to the official technical aspect of it, we're still not going to support it at all. That's what
Well, I
this
guess
is
I'm
basically
getting a
saying.
little confused sometimes between whether you're talking about the legal aspect of it, the
In
spirit
any way, does the church
of
support
it.
in any form in any circumstance a man and a man being together romantically, sexually, and anything like that?
Supporting a romantic relationship? No.
Yeah, so
In that
it
regard.
seems a
Yeah.
little bit double-edged sword here to say it's not important and God will welcome you into the kingdom of heaven, but then also preach that we're never going to allow you to be together.
Oh, but I don't think I ever said it wasn't
No, of course.
important and that God's going to welcome you into the kingdom of
It's
heaven.
not
Did I ever
important as far as getting into the kingdom of heaven itself. That's something that
I don't
God
think I
would
said
consider.
that.
Uh, that's what I was saying. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm
I don't
sorry. I'm just trying
say
to
that. Yeah.
say my interpretation of what it sounds like the church is saying. It does sound like what you're suggesting is no one thinks it's important as far as in their specific individual circumstances getting into in the kingdom of heaven. God will consider them just like anybody else. Um, but
Okay, that's not
also,
what I'm saying.
oh, I'm okay. I'm getting confused then.
Okay, I guess this is where it's good to dialogue and talk, right? So
Of course, with love, and that's
I
what we're saying.
absolutely. So what I would say is this. I guess what I was trying to distinguish was that we see people as individuals and we see that anybody, well, in families and so forth, but if anybody were to come into the church, we wouldn't turn people away. We wouldn't reject people on the basis that they said they're homosexual or whatever the thing is that they come into the church for. We would welcome people into the doors of the church. There's distinctions between becoming a member and so forth. And that gets a little bit different because when you become a member of any organization, you have to agree that you believe certain things, right? So
Right.
we wouldn't necessarily say that a person would be a church member, but we wouldn't turn people away because they were gay if
Mm.
they walked into the church.
Would you
And
allow them
yeah,
to while they're in a relationship be any sort of official in the church?
no, but because we also wouldn't allow anybody to come into the church who's not a member of the church to be in a leadership position.
So
So
would you
that
allow a
that wouldn't
homosexual
matter.
couple to both individually and as a couple be a part of the church as a member?
Well, in order to be a part of the church as a member, they'd have to agree to share the same beliefs, right? And so they wouldn't share the same beliefs. So then, of course, that would be no to that because, and the thing is why would they want to?
Well, because as far as you're concerned, it's true, right? Everything that you
What?
believe. As far as
Oh,
you're
sure.
concerned, that God created the world, God is
Yeah.
an actor in it as well as uh, working. God is in everything essentially, um,
Yeah. I
and if
just
they
wanted to
accepted
carefully
that,
dis.
because as an
Mhm.
individual, that would be accepting that much of the truth. But if they couldn't accept that homosexuality was wrong, and everything else they believed 100%, everything you've ever talked about, they agree with you 110%. But when it comes to
Yeah.
homosexuality, they're like that one, okay, except for that, everything else is good. I love my husband and he's amazing and he supports me when I'm down. You would say no, he
See,
doesn't because a woman would do better.
well,
But
that's where I would say that's sort of a false, a false thing there because
okay,
there's nobody that's going to ever come into the church and believe every single thing else except for that one issue, right? I mean, that's just a nobody's going to be that way because if you believe that homosexuality is okay, then you're not going to believe in some of the other things that scripture teaches either. You
like
can't believe in just one thing, but all. I think if we explored like all the different tenets of Christianity, we'd find that there's probably some disagreements in other areas too that that person would be experiencing because
but if someone came to
uh,
you and said that everything I would agree with except for this one thing, you would say, well, you must disagree with something else too.
well, so if a person wanted to become a member of a church,
Mm-hmm.
so what would happen is that the leadership, with anybody who comes into the church, regardless of sexual orientation or whatever, they would want to sit down, if they said, hey, we're interested, they would be attending the church. Hopefully they'd attended a few times and say, yeah, we want to be a part of this church because we like it. And then the leadership would sit down with them and they would talk to them about where they're at in their faith and what's going on and why do they want to become a member and do you know what our church believes and this is what our church believes if you don't know, and they would share those things with them. And I think in that kind of discourse with somebody that people would discover that maybe they're not on board with the same things, because I think that if a person was living a homosexual lifestyle, they would they would disagree with some of the other teachings of scripture. And so the church would say, well, because you don't have we don't agree with these things, let's have some more discussion and talk about these things. They wouldn't turn them away, but they wouldn't at that point in time would say we'd rather you not become a member at this time, but we could sit and have more dialogues and discussions about it.
Interesting. But as long as they held
So
that belief, they wouldn't be able to become a member.
well, a person doesn't just get to become a member because they believe that homosexuality is wrong. If they came to the church and said, we think homosexuality is wrong, they would have to share a whole other kinds of beliefs as well. We've had other people
Right.
come to our church who haven't become
Just don't
members
think.
because they don't share certain other things in common with our church, but they've been happy to attend a church regardless. So
So if there
if
was a
that's what,
church the same size as yours that preached exactly the same thing, except for when talking about homosexuality, and then in which case it said homosexuality is a okay. You can have a homosexual relationship. You can be married in this church. You can bring your family and friends, whatever you'd like, and they preached that that was the correct way to live. You would say that that church, even though that's the only difference, is actually misleading people down a dark path that ends in hell.
I would again say that that's
Unlikely, maybe, but in this
and
hypothetical
not
situation.
not not unlikely, just impossible.
But
Oh,
perhaps
it's you're
perhaps
asking you're
it's
asking me
possible,
to
but it's
yeah,
very
you're
very
asking me
difficult.
to Yeah, you're asking me to kind of give you an answer to a hypothetical situation, but
Hmm.
it's just not a
Like I said, I don't know
it's not.
is a great answer.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't well, I mean, I feel like in some ways by asking that question, what's happening is kind of I'm being boxed into kind of answer one way or another to get the answer that you want me to give you
Sure,
about something, which in your sense
I
is
would.
trying to tell you that it's not in fate that, so I think
Well,
scripture's pretty
that's
clear
one way
about
to
homosexuality.
interpret the way I'm. If I told you that that's not what I'm trying to do, would that help? Would that quell that
No,
fear?
I mean it's the way the dialogue happens sometimes. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I guess what I'm trying
Or
to
bad
say
news.
is
Definitely.
I just don't want to go there.
Sure.
I just don't want to go there because I don't believe that that would ever be the case. I think there's too many other things that would be different that and the one question that I would have in response to that a little bit would be if a person knew that the church teaches against it, what is their purpose for coming to the church and
They would.
wanting to be a member of a church that believes something that they know is different from that doesn't support them? Why would they want to be a part of that church?
Maybe they were born and raised in Christianity and were told from a very early age that that this is the way to live and this is the right path. And maybe they don't disagree with that, except for this one issue which they're struggling with. I've talked to people who um, still believe in God and all and everything, would call themselves Christians, but also would call themselves bisexual and open
Mm-hmm.
and active in their relationships with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm coming from. Just
Yeah.
because you're in a homosexual relationship does not mean that you don't believe in God and that sort of thing. And maybe you believe that homosexuality is a sin even still at it, but at the same time, you know what I'm saying. Just because you've
Yeah.
accepted homosexuality as a part of yourself doesn't mean that the other teachings of the Bible are wrong.
Right. So I guess
Maybe that's the
the
only thing
reason
that
that
you're struggling with.
yeah, the reason that I asked the question is not obviously, of course, not that I didn't think that people who are homosexual couldn't believe in God. But there's a reason that a person comes to a church, whether they're homosexual or not, right? So, for example, my parents, whenever they started having children, they thought it was really important to go to church because that was the right thing to do whenever you had kids. They wanted to raise their kids in the church because
But
they had
who were
had
the
some
kids before that?
exposure to the church. Well, Poppy, or sorry, you call him Poppy. It's okay.
I call him
He
Poppy.
grew up. I don't want to speak for him, but I know he grew up in the church,
Mm-hmm.
and but he kind of I don't know if he was attending church or not. You'd have to ask him. But I know that they shared that whenever they were young and shortly after they were married, I think when they were pregnant with Aunt Vicky, um, maybe they weren't attending church or were attending sporadically, I don't know. And they thought that it would be good to start going to church because now there was a child on the way.
Hmm.
And so they started seeking out churches to attend. And that was their motivation at the time. And they would say at that point that they weren't believers before then. They knew about the church, they attended church, but they didn't necessarily understand what it meant to believe in Christ. And so up until that time, they would say they weren't believers. And so
Interesting.
people seek out the church for different reasons. They seek out the church because, hey, this is good because we're going to have kids. Or they seek out the church, well, we're married, this is the right thing to do. So there's something in everybody, regardless of sexual orientation, that makes them want to attend a church. And so I that's why I was asking the question. Like, I think it would be different for different homosexual couples as to why they might want to attend a church or not. But if there's some desire to go to church and they've had some exposure to church in the background, there's something motivating them to go to church. And for what reasons, I don't know. But there's some kind of motivation that says, hey, maybe it would be good to start going to church. I would wonder if somebody came in, why would they? We ask other people who come to the church, what makes you want to come to our church, kind of a thing. And it's interesting to hear people's answers as to why they want to come to church. And sometimes it's because they're figuring things out and they want to get answers to things and so forth. And I don't know why a person would want to come to the church or not, what their intentions or their motivations for coming to church were. But I don't think a person usually comes to church with the idea of feeling like everything in their life is completely okay and that there's just this one area, that they just want to go to church because it's just the right thing to do. I think a lot of people come to church for more reasons than that. And so I
But
would just,
it's still possible that they believe, they just wanted to go to church, right?
it could be, it's possible that they just want to go to church, but I think most of us don't just go to church because we feel like our life is completely in order and everything's wonderful about it. So I think that people who are
But
homosexual
regardless of whether or
for
not
other
everything is
reasons.
wonderful or awful, truth would be the truth as far as the Christian church is concerned, right?
Certainly, but if they knew that and they're still wanting to attend the church, that's just an interesting thing to explore. I would want to know if you've grown up in the church and you know that the church sometimes acts poorly about these issues, or sometimes that the church teaches this. I'd be curious to know why they were still wanting to attend, knowing that that would be the case with this church,
Do
and
you
then that
think
would
that
create
even if you don't
discussion and
believe,
dialogue.
do you think that even if you don't believe in God, you should still go to church?
I think anybody could do anything, right?
But we're talking about should. Should they go to church? Still.
Should a person who doesn't believe in God go to church?
An atheist, yes.
I think it would be good for a person who says
Good-heartedly,
they don't
by the way. Not like to
good
question things.
good.
To go there to
Uh,
listen to the sermons and
yeah,
read the
well,
Bible.
just like that lady I was describing to you, she didn't have the best of intentions in going to church, but she said, well, if I'm going to do this research to say that Christianity is bad and wrong, then I better do my research. And she actually went and sat in on the church to listen to them. So I would think that anybody, even with good intentions, if they're going to say that they don't believe in God, would want to have at least say that they've attended church for a little while so that they can feel like they legitimately have cause to say that, right?
Hmm. Do you think that you can get to the answer that homosexuality is immoral without using the Bible as your basis?
I would say that the Bible is my basis for life, so the answer would be no.
So, do you believe in evolution?
Boy, you're bringing up lots of controversial subjects.
Controversial only in the uh,
Yeah, I would
interestingly only
say
in the religious studies.
um, with regard to even the scientific study of evolution, I
As
think,
scientists currently hold, Big Bang, Earth created, one single-celled organism, all the way up to where we are now.
yeah, no.
Hmm.
But I don't deny that there's pieces of some of the things that they say that are truthful or, are possible, but I will not say that on the whole, the principle or the philosophy of it is true or
Well, the
accurate.
philosophy of it is not important as far as scientists are concerned.
I think that even if Darwin himself actually said that he would reject his theory later on in his life. So,
Unfortunately, that's not true. Darwin, towards the end of his life, became more and more um, not open, but more open. You know what I mean about what the ramifications of what he was saying. In personal letters to his friends, he actually talked about how he was at best agnostic. That was where he was
yeah,
in
well,
his life.
it's not my subject of expertise for sure. So I'd have to go back and look at that and kind of
Right.
do a little more research
Well,
myself to see it. But
that would be true as far as as far as I've heard it.
yeah,
In his book, the what's it called, something of species. I think it's
the origin of
Origin of
species.
Species. The first edition
Yeah.
had it didn't have any mention of God. The second edition, actually, because there was a bit of an upset in the church, in the last paragraph he added a passage about God, and then when everything had died down, he actually took that passage out at the end. All his
Hmm.
decisions. So it's really interesting
Interesting.
to hear
Yeah.
it that
Well, I
way. The
definitely have
first
to look
edition
into
was
that.
one way, second edition was one way, another way, and the third edition went back to the way the first one was, without God.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a subject that, I remember studying in high school and college more. And of course, I've kind of gotten out of that. I definitely have not studied it for quite a while.
So one thing that's concerning to me going forward as far as where humanity is headed. So do you accept medicine as doctors as being extremely knowledgeable? And if a doctor tells you something is a certain way, then even if you get a second opinion, you still trust the doctor wholeheartedly.
Oh, I say sure.
Yeah. So the process for um, studying medicine is very similar to the process of studying um, geology or any other scientific research. Actually, you could say that technically doctors don't know anything because they're just working on theories and stuff. But at the end of the day, I would never say that a doctor is wrong from the get go. I would say that they have to be proven wrong. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's really interesting to me that even though the processes are extremely similar, that Christians and other religious people seemed very not trusting of scientists, but very trusting of the medical field. And even though that you and I are in the same level as we don't know anything about either, right?
Right.
But
So
we'll
what's
trust the
interesting,
doctors even though we haven't done the research.
well, what's interesting about that is that you could kind of say the other way too, is I think it's really interesting that science uses the very things that God's created and given them and the knowledge and the
Hmm.
expertise.
That would be assuming that from the get go that
Well,
God was real in the first place,
of
which we haven't
course,
proven.
of course, but they're assuming that God's not real, so it's okay to assume it the other way around, right?
No, that is not what scientists believe. Scientists believe
Okay, so
atheism in
so
general is the lack of conviction that there is a God.
well, I'm
Basically,
not
not
suggesting
even
that.
convinced that there is.
Yeah,
They
I'm
would
not
say that there's
suggesting
not
that.
enough evidence or
Well, I'm
something
sorry.
like that.
I don't mean to be talking over you.
No,
I'm
of
sorry.
course it's Zoom. It's gonna happen.
So yeah, I mean, so this is a whole nother, it can really go on for a bit of a discussion for a little bit, but I would say that um, the very things, I don't know how a science can study science and not see God in the study of science, and how they can reject that. Because there's a lot that science still doesn't know about things. And I love doctors that even acknowledge that, like even neurologists, which I've seen unfortunately too
Neurologists
many.
don't know anything about the brain.
So that they say that what they know about the brain, I think one told me they know either 20% or 30% of what the brain does, and the rest they don't know. But what they know of the 20%, they know a lot of.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
Sometimes I think scientists aren't willing to acknowledge the things that they don't know. I don't think a lot of the evidence for evolution and so forth that people have given, scientists have given, is based on a lot of it, which some are unwilling to acknowledge, is based on conjecture a little bit because some of the methodology that they use to determine some of those things isn't foolproof either. And so they have to be willing to acknowledge that maybe some of their theories, because they weren't there, if they say things happened a billion years ago, well, they weren't there a billion years ago to know exactly how things went down. And their instruments you can't verify that actually know what happened a billion years ago because the instruments themselves were made nowadays to determine the things that happened way back then. So they're doing the best they
Mm.
can with what they have, but still a lot of hypothesis. So it's still a lot of conjecture in some of those things that they made. So some of the theories are based on some conjecture, but a lot of scientists aren't willing to admit that and to acknowledge that. And so some of that, I think, is okay for us to believe. Now, there are certain things that I would say that sometimes Christians don't attribute enough to science. And I would say the opposite as well, that I would say that there's some things that doctors and scientists would even say that they don't know the answer to and they can't explain why certain things have happened. Now, that doesn't mean that it had to have been a big healing, some for doctors or something like that, but there are just things sometimes that doctors don't have the answers to and they can't explain either. So I think that gives room and possibility for that to be God as well. So I would like to see doctors and scientists explore the option of the possibility of God, but I
So
would also like to see
assuming
Christians
that they
acknowledge.
accepted that the possibility or accepted the possibility of God. wholesale.
Mhm.
What would that change as far as the sciences go? How would
Um,
the sciences change
well, I mean, science. So,
besides the
I,
conclusions that they've come to?
right. Well, that's a big part of science, right? So methodology. You can't really debate too much about methodology. This is the method that we use. This is how we did it. This is what we wrote about it. This is the measurements. These are the data that we received based on that. You can't necessarily
So
debate,
you
but
would
the
definitely
interpretation of it
you would definitely
and
say though.
how.
I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
You would definitely say though that the world was created in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested.
Yeah.
And
I
also that
mean,
there was at one point early on a worldwide flood 6,000 years
can
ago about.
scientists disprove that?
Geologists would say yes.
How can they disprove it since they
Because you
weren't
can look at
actually
the layers of dirt and understand that there was never any
that there's been
life
other
prior
science,
to
but
it.
there's what would you say about this then? Okay, so we're just having fun, right? So
Yeah, of course. This is I genuinely I think that that is
okay,
wrong of Christianity, and I'm not trying to beat
okay,
around the bush. I do think that
okay.
that's wrong, and I love you, and I'm not disregarding you as
Oh,
a person and who comes to your own
I
conclusions.
understand.
It's just
What would you say
that
about scientists who disagree with one another
that's fine. Let them
on that issue?
let them. They
So
can come to
even
their own conclusions.
right, but there's even scientists that would say
Agreed.
that they would agree and disagree too. So that aren't Christians. So I would say, you're pinning a lot on Christianity about things, but I think there are genuine scientists who kind of have those same disagreements. But it seems like it's okay for scientists to disagree with things. But if a Christian person disagrees with it, that maybe that makes it wrong and bad.
Well, that I would say that that would be closer to the truth, yes, because usually the Christian is disagreeing with the scientists without having done any even close to the research that that scientist has done. So
I would,
a religious
yeah.
person would say, I don't know if that's right because, and this is just me being blunt, didn't read about it in the Bible, and the scientist would say, I've lived my life 30 years studying this one thing. I know what I'm
Mhm.
talking about, and you're telling me no because it wasn't written down in your book.
Yeah, I would say that
That seems a
there,
little sketchy to me.
well, just because something's not proven doesn't make it false, though, right?
Correct, but it does sound like the Christian is putting themselves on a pedestal that they should not be putting themselves on, like an
Oh,
equal
well,
footing. That doesn't seem right.
yeah. Well, that's an
It's like
interesting
me saying
interpretation.
that I'm as when talking about medical issues that I know as much as a doctor because
Yeah.
I looked it up on the internet.
I think where we don't know things, all of us need to say we don't know things,
Correct.
scientists and Christians alike. And so,
So if
so
a
I don't,
scientist didn't say this is the way it happened, but they said all the evidence that I've researched my entire life lead to this conclusion, and I cannot make Christianity work as far as geology is concerned. If we're talking about a geologist, you would say, ah, well, you just started at the wrong place.
well, I don't think a scientist could disprove all of Christianity based on a geological finding.
But he
But
could disprove that there was a worldwide flood.
I would say this. So I think a person who is a scientist would tell you that a lot of the things, and especially their interpretation of data, is sometimes based on faith and science. Now they're going to tell
What
you that it's,
what is
but I,
what is the creed that they would have faith in?
well, I guess what I would say, the creed would not be Christianity, of course, but
Right.
it takes faith sometimes to make some of the assertions that they make about some of the findings that they have. Now,
Right. When
I
you ask them what they have faith in, and what would what would the scientist in your from your perspective say
well, it would depend on what he was studying, right?
in this
So,
case geology?
so if he's studying geology, I would say that if you look at a lot of the instrumentation that they use, everything has limitations. And so if the scientist was admitting, or not admitting, but acknowledging the limitations of their instruments, I think it's hard for a scientist to completely disprove um, those things. Now, do I have all the stuff in front of me that can kind of disprove that to you and share that with you right at this moment? No.
Neither
But
do
that,
I. I don't have anything.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think there are certain things that are very matter of the fact, very, yes, this is what I've studied, this is the data. bam, this is the conclusion that everybody needs to come to because there's no debate about the truth in that. Like that has to be the case. I think when we make instruments in this day and age that are supposed to be able to determine things that happened billions or thousands of years ago, and we think that we can say with 100% certainty that something did or did not happen based on an instrument that we created in this time, it makes it very challenging to 100% wholeheartedly accept something like that. Now, I would love to see more about how the instruments work and how the person made that determination and how they looked at the strata levels. But when it comes down to it, somebody had to make the assertion that the strata levels were what they were at a certain time, and this is how we determine them. And carbon dating and other kinds of things are some of the things that they, well, not carbon dating for the strata, but um, they use some kind of measurement to determine what happened. There's other scientists that have said, well, no, you we look at those same strata levels, and that doesn't necessarily mean this or that doesn't mean that. So how do you know which scientist to believe if all scientists should believe because they have some sort of level of expertise and so forth? You have to look at the data that they present, and you have to look at the instrumentation that they use and their methodology, and you have to do research and stuff as well. So
You would say that then that Christianity has done its due diligence. Everyone who disagrees with geologists and saying
no, I would not. I
you say
would
that
just like
they did
everybody
not.
in the world. But I no, I would say Christians and other, any person, Christian or not Christian, there's a lot of people that speak to things that they don't have knowledge about, and that's not
Right.
good.
Like earlier in this conversation when you said that you did not believe in that there was Big Bang, you actually don't know if there was Big Bang. You just pretty sure that there wasn't a Big Bang.
Oh yeah, I guess I thought you were looking for more of a definite answer at that time, but yeah, you're right. Based on that, I could say I'm not 100% sure that there wasn't. I
I
could
mean,
say
you
that, sure.
seem very willing to jump into a solid answer before actually understanding anything about the
Yeah, but
subject.
even that works on both sides, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, of
You know,
course.
most
When someone
people say
asks you a
they believe in
question, do
it.
you believe
Yeah.
in this? The inference is that you're going to get a yes or no answer.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you nailed it down and said, can you for sure say that this didn't happen? I would say, of course, I couldn't say that for sure that didn't happen. I could say that it's very likely it didn't happen. I could say that the Bible says it doesn't happen. And for me, that's truth. But I guess, for others, that's not truth for them.
But
So,
you would say it sounds like that the Bible is perfect, the perfect word of God,
absolutely, yes.
and you don't think that there's any mistakes at all in the Bible.
I would say that is accurate.
Um, Last week or a couple weeks ago, I was looking up what I was looking for maybe something that non Christians would view as a problem in the Bible, and it led
Hmm.
me to a passage that I think would actually be, as far as I'm concerned, something that is not consistent with what I view God as.
Hmm.
Numbers 31, chapter 17 and 18. This is off the top of my head. I don't have anything in front of me. I didn't have anything prepared. Is what I'm trying to say. Numbers 17 and 18. I'm sorry. Numbers 31, chapters 17 and 18. Sorry, verse 17 and 18. At this point, the Israelites are moving into Canaan, and this is the generation that after the generation that was turned away. This generation is viewed as obedient to God in every way, and therefore righteous enough to enter the promised land, uh, which means that they are obedient to God and Moses' teachings. Um, the Israelites go to war with a specific city in which they win, and that's a really a glorious triumph. They beat all the warriors, and they take the women and children left over in the city, and they gather them up and they bring them back to Moses. And Moses looks at them and is very confused at why they didn't offal everybody. He's confused as to why they didn't kill them all off because at that time they're supposed to end the line essentially. And he instructs them to uh, every male immediately kill, and every woman who has been with a man immediately kill, and to take all the virgin girls for themselves. Now this is really interesting because worst case scenario, and I will say that it's not worst case scenario as far as the studies have gone, but worst case scenario, God just ordered because Moses is the mouthpiece of God, just ordered the death of a lot of innocent newborn baby boys, and also required that all of the girls are essentially, worst case scenario, sexual slaves of the Israelites. Now, best case scenario with this story, God ordered the death of innocent baby boys, and the virgin girls were totally fine. And let's just assume that every woman who had been with a man was not okay, so they were evil. Let's say, or whatever. God ordered the death of baby boys. God ordered His people to, and this is as graphic as I can be, take the life, slit the throats
Hmm.
of babies, 0 to 1. Uh, I don't know if that's consistent with the way God is, and I don't think that that's consistent with the way that God is, as far as Christianity is concerned. And it really does concern me that someone would look at the Bible and go, "Yep, all perfect," and then also that story's in there, and they're going, "Yeah, that's acceptable because God decides when people die. God can order God's people to kill newborn baby boys, and that's acceptable as long as God said it." I don't think that God would ever say that. And you're welcome to look it up. I as far as that story goes, there's no way around how awful that is. And I'd love to hear what you think about that verse that I just mentioned.
Well, before I speak to things like that, I actually like to take time to really study. So I'd hesitate to say too much about it
Would you like to read a little more with
until
me?
well, I'd like to read more about the context. Like when I say study, I don't mean just read it. I mean
I,
like,
I tried to give you as much context as I could, but yeah, that's
yeah,
fair.
yeah, I understand. But I'd like to do a little bit more on like what was happening prior to that time, what led up to it, and what the purpose of that was, and so forth. So,
But immediately upon
'cause
hearing that,
that's
if I had told you that God ordered the death of innocent newborn baby boys, you would say, "No, He didn't. That didn't happen." Right before knowing the story that I just told you.
well, I know there's lots of things in Old Testament history that happened that are difficult to understand in that regard. And so,
Usually, bad people do bad things though and are punished for it,
well, it's not, no, there's lots of stories in Old Testament history about good people doing bad things too. I
and are
mean,
punished for it.
like David, who, King David, who, was
Was
on
punished for
the
it.
rooftop. He had an affair with a guy's woman and then killed her husband. I
But
mean,
from the get go, that was wrong, right? God said don't don't have
right,
sex with someone else's
right,
wife. He knew that going in, but
right.
the warriors to
And
slit the throats of those babies, that was actually acceptable because God told them to, and they were righteous
right.
in
Well,
doing so.
so I'm not saying that things are acceptable. There's sometimes part of what I need to look at too in that story is I wish I was I do my best to read my Bible and to try and
Mm-hmm.
understand things through the historical context that it was
Right.
taking place in and what was said. But the Old Testament, there's a lot of it, so
Mm-hmm.
it takes time to understand all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to look at it a little bit more,
I
but
guess, but you would say that the Old Testament
offset
God
my
is the same
reaction.
God as the New Testament God and as today.
Absolutely,
Okay, so
yes.
if God says that
Stories.
there is a specific circumstance in which you can slit the throat of a newborn baby boy, that today that would also hold up. That there is circumstances today, right now, in which God could order someone to uh, take the life of that baby. If it happened, if it did happen, this is
Yeah.
hypothetical, I guess, at this
Yeah.
point. If God said it
Um,
at some point, then it's true today.
Well,
Possibly
again,
true
I
today.
want to look at the context. I wouldn't say, I don't think that that's what God would say today.
But if it happened in the Bible and that is confirmed, then currently that could happen again.
Well, there's lots of things that happen in the Bible that God would never say are okay to do.
Yeah, but if he said specifically, like, this is what I want in the Old Testament, he still would want the same thing potentially at some point today. He could want that same thing.
Well, God could do anything, but I
Right.
wouldn't say that is consistent with what his teachings have been.
I would say that it's consistent that God is in that is as awful as it is. I could say it is consistent with God's character to sometimes, for whatever reason that I don't understand, take the life of a baby himself. Like a baby passing away is tragic for us as humans, but you could say yes, God has a plan that I don't understand. God took the life of this child. I hope to see them again one day. But what you couldn't say is God told, or in this situation, my pastor told me that God told him that he wants this baby to die by my hand. My pastor told me to kill this baby in his mouthpiece of God, so that's why I did it, and that I am justified in doing so. I don't think that you could say that. I think that would be insanity.
Right. So what I can say from the onset here is you took a passage here from Numbers, right? In
Numbers
scripture.
31.
Yeah, Numbers 31. And so Numbers historically comes, so let me just get here real quick. I'm pulling it up now just to kind of look at it a little bit. And again, I don't know much. I haven't spent a lot of time recently even looking at this.
Yeah,
I
this,
remember
by the
hearing
way,
about
this
it
is
at one
one of
point.
the. I think the Bible is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful text. I think that the only issue I have is when someone says that it's perfect. And then I'm like, okay, well, now you've just given a target. Anything that looks wrong could potentially be wrong, and therefore
Yeah,
needs
but
to be
I
killed.
think the Bible's an easy target for a lot of people, right? So just you don't understand something doesn't necessarily mean he uses lots of examples and things in there and that sometimes we don't understand. And you're right, that does clearly say this is what he said to do. But I'm trying
So
to
God did call for it, or God called Moses to say, yes, kill these babies, and that was just.
well, so now therefore kill every male among the little ones and kill every woman who is known man by lying with him, but all the young girls who have not known a man, keep them alive for yourselves and so forth. Yeah, it sounds awful.
Yes.
But um, I haven't spent any time trying to
Mm.
understand
I would love
that
to
and
at
what
some
it was
point.
said.
I know it's late.
So
I
I,
know it's like what
yeah,
11:30 for you.
yeah, I
And
would
I'm
love
so
to find out more about it and talk with you another time some more about that passage. Just do a little bit more research on it ourselves. I know there's awful things that have happened in Scripture.
but not ordained by God.
Um, well, I mean, you could argue in some ways that everything's ordained by God, right?
But
But
usually there's some good reason.
but
I would say somewhat justified reason for it. The Sodom and Gomorrah, they were apparently awful people and through, except for this one family, and even them they struggled. Lot leaving the his wife was turned into a pillar of salt, that kind of thing. Uh, that story, he decimated a city. I'm sure that there were babies in that city as well, but at the same time, God said it was justified because they were awful people. Maybe he was right. I'm sorry, did I
yeah,
steal it away from what
I
you were trying to say?
no, it's okay. It's I just hesitate to speak too much on something that I don't know much about, so I don't want to sound like I'm an authority on a passage or anything like that that I haven't
Mm,
taken time to look at or to maybe even ask others about and kind of see where that kind of came from. So yeah, there's things that I don't always understand, but when I get to those things like you just presented me with, I want to take time to look at them and to try and understand how that either fits or doesn't fit with my understanding of scripture and so forth. So
by the way, this
um,
is potentially the this potentially could be the only mistake in the Bible as far as talking about the character of God. I'm not saying it is, but it could. Seems like one of the most damning evidence of non-perfection in the Bible to me.
yeah, I'm just a little leery to say that it's not a perfect thing. Now, I would say that um, there's a lot sometimes that I don't understand about scripture, sometimes historically, contextually, culturally, and so forth. I'm just not a person that's very quick to say that, yeah, there's an error in scripture.
Right, of
um,
course, and as a Christian, you shouldn't be jumped onto that conclusion.
yeah, but I don't want to
Fair to
just
say that there
blindly,
probably a
yeah.
point.
Yeah, so because there's a lot of people that have spent a lot more time looking at this than I have,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see what they have to say about it, and then maybe get together with you again and talk with you a little bit more about what I found, and then kind of have a discussion about it then. But I don't, with regard to our whole even discussion and stuff like that, I appreciate that you're trying to
I'm trying to work this
have a
stuff out.
that you're trying to put stuff out and have a discussion on it. And I mean, I know you feel passionately about things, and I definitely feel passionately about things sometimes. And I'm grateful that you're willing to talk about things, and I'm grateful that you want to have these kinds of discussions. I just
It's a
I just
lot.
want to be careful. Yeah, it is a lot. It is, yeah. And I don't want to ever feel like, and I hope you haven't felt like in any way I feel like I'm an authority on either Christianity
Well,
or
naturally,
any of
being
these
that you're my
subjects.
aunt, you are an authority on basically all the things that I grew up with. So that would be Christianity, and
Yeah.
as far as experience in the
Yeah.
world, that you are an authority.
Yeah.
But I do at this point view people as more equals as far as adults who
Yeah.
have their own
Yeah.
interpretations of the world. I think that's
Yeah.
the only
And so
difference.
there's
Whereas before, I would look at
here's
you as mainly as my aunt.
oh, okay. I would just say that, you definitely have some views on some things, and I would encourage you to just keep exploring those some more. But I would encourage you, um, even just from talking to your family member, which I love talking to you. um, I would encourage you if you have more questions about why homosexuality and some of those things is such an issue in the church, or why some of the churches have the stances that they have on some of those things, to maybe go to a church and talk to a pastor about it and see where they come from on some of those things as well. If you're interested, I could even send just to help you at least understand the other side a little bit more, unless you feel like maybe you've kind of already done that. I don't know.
I haven't
Um,
talked directly to a pastor in a long time, so I think that's
yeah.
probably something I need to do again. I've actually been
Yeah. I mean,
considering talking to the current pastor of the church that I grew up in,
uh-huh.
because, or I
And
guess minister of involvement, because they don't have a pastor.
yeah, if I find some things, would you be okay with me
I
sending some
would,
of that stuff to you just so you can kind of
any
at
link
least
at all that
grasp
you
an
send me,
understanding?
I will genuinely love. Like any link that you want to send me,
Okay.
and I'll send you.
Yeah.
Real quick before
Yeah,
I
you can
end.
do the same. That's
Yeah,
fine.
real quick before I end. There's a guy named Jordan Peterson. Have you heard of him?
I don't believe I have now.
Lovely. I'm gonna send you some links. He did a great series, which is more of a deep dive into the Pinocchio movies, the Disney movies, and he did a great
Okay.
job. He's an evolutionary biologist slash Christian, so it'd be really interesting to hear his perspective on why that would be. And he also did a series that is amazing, so good on biblical studies. Because he's a Christian, he goes through starting at Genesis right at the beginning. I think
Mm-hmm.
his first lecture is about in the beginning was the word. I think that's all he gets through, and he talks about everything that kind of means to him.
Yes.
And that's like 2.5 hours of him just talking about that one line. Getting his perspective is a really interesting way to see that there is a pathway for evolution in Christianity, even if Christianity has to change its form a little bit, as far as I'm concerned. He would say that, I'm not sure what he would say, I'm not going to speak for him, but he is also an evolutionary biologist as well as a psychologist as well as a Christian.
Hmm. Interesting.
And I'll send you those links, and I would love to get anything that you send me as well.
Yeah, I just so I'm grateful that you think that I'm an authority on some things at least.
Well,
But
naturally, you fall into that
I
position. You're my aunt,
yeah,
and I
well
respect that.
yeah, I've taken some time to research some of the things that we've talked about, and I've been curious about some of the things that we've talked about, and I've been taught about some of the things that we've talked about, and some of it certainly is opinion, and and so forth. But I do try hard to
Figure
make
it out.
sure that I'm trying to figure things out. Yeah, I do try to
The pursuit of
research.
truth is what I would say Jesus is mainly wanted for us.
Right. So for example, when you were talking about, homosexuality more, and I mentioned that woman's name to you, I was curious about the subject, because it is an interesting subject to think about. And it's really been interesting to read her take on it, and I appreciate and value her take on it because it wasn't something that she took lightly. It was a very long process for her to
Yeah,
get to where she got to, and to just
like me getting to this point.
yeah. But I mean, even longer, because she's much older, only
Oh,
because of age.
oh, I see, I see.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear her kind of her perspective on it as well. And so I've tried to really try to come to an understanding of some of these things, and but I also wholeheartedly believe in scripture, and I don't just try to, I'm not trying to justify scripture. I kind of feel like it stands for itself. But I
Yeah,
do try to
well,
understand it because
because
it is
because that
complex.
naturally I think that that would be trying to justify scripture. I'm not saying you're wrong to do it. I'm just saying that that kind of does like trying to justify scripture
Oh yeah, that I mean,
as a
as far
Christian.
as it goes, yeah. I mean, I think sometimes if I do if I've done that, or if I've kind of, I don't really need to speak for it. And if I do, sometimes I do a disservice to that, because I don't want to try to make it say something that it's not saying, or try and make it not say something that it is saying. And so I just want to be careful with it too. But sometimes there's truths that you understand or that you've studied, but you just can't always articulate some of those things as well. And so sometimes I don't consider myself the best
Oh,
articulator of those things as well. So
I can't even say that word that I was struggling with for a year.
so sometimes I hesitate a little bit because I know sometimes the things that I say don't come out quite the way I'd like for them to come out, or and so forth. And so I do my best to try to love people and to try and just meet them where they are. And I've learned that just I think I've learned that abundantly from being a Christian, to just not assume that everybody else has got it wrong and that I've got it right, and to realize my own shortcomings and my own failure in life. And I think the older that I get, the more I see that in myself. And so I
Well,
realize,
that's
even
great to
as a
see.
I realize that, there's just a lot that like talking
There's
to
always more to
people,
learn.
understanding of where people are, it goes a long way. And so I certainly want to do that and be an ambassador of doing that as well. And so I'm glad to have these kind of conversations. And I don't know everything about all these subjects. I don't know even how to articulate the things that I do know very well.
Yeah.
um, but
I went back to school, by the way.
You did. Good for
Yeah,
you.
I'm currently studying. I'm taking English, taking philosophy classes, trying to get back on track.
Yeah. Where are you going?
NPC here in Monterey. I mean,
Okay,
it's
good.
online, but it's NPC.
Good, yeah. So I guess one of the things I'm learning too as I get older is the older that I get and the more that I know, the more I realize what I don't know.
The essence of philosophy itself.
Yes.
There's always more to learn.
Yeah. And so, perhaps there were times when we talked that maybe I, you know, s-
You've always been a lovely person to talk to.
oh, well, thank you
I
very
remember
much.
sitting across from you at Aunt Vicky and Uncle David's house one time, and I think that that was like the first time an adult had really actually talked to me like an adult in my life.
Mhm. I think you
Um,
said that at your wedding to me, didn't you say that? I think you did. You shared that. That was very,
if I had shared that, then it was true, and I still believe it to this day.
it was at the reception. You kind of pulled me aside and said something very sweet of that nature.
And I'm astounded by. I do look up to you, and I always have, and I will
Oh,
continue to no matter what.
well, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Hmm.
I
Oh,
do love
there's
you.
the hug.
I do love you, sweetie.
I'm
I
doing
think
my
you're
best.
it's weird to imagine you. I hope this doesn't sound badly, but it's just so weird to imagine you all grown up and married right now.
Yeah, I know.
It's it's sort of like over time as it passes, like you get frozen at moments in time, and I still sometimes see you at certain places in time when you're a lot younger.
Yeah.
And
I don't look like
and
that
so
anymore. I look at the old pictures of me and I'm like, oh boy.
no, you were always a sweet kid. It was always
uh,
appreciative
uh,
of the
I've had a lot
I
of growth that I've had to go through over the years, and I'm not anywhere near a place that I'd like to be. There's always there's always a lot of space between you and the ideal.
Yeah. Well, your mom was really helpful to me whenever I was pregnant with James, because I said oh no, I said we grew up with just girls in our house. I don't know what boy, like what do you do with boys? And she said you'll love it. Boys are so sweet on their moms. She said Jacob's been such a sweetie for me, and that was such an encouragement to me, like becoming a mom. a boy. I was like, oh no, what am I? And I found that to be true even with my boys that they do tend to love their moms and and anyhow, it was just really sweet. But I remember her always saying that with you, like, oh, he's such a sweet little boy. And
I
so
love hearing
I
those stories.
I found you to be that way. Every time I visited, all the different things, like you're always, just eager to kind of hang out and visit and talk and kind of
Yeah.
play and things. And so you're just, it's just, I guess, the past, yes, you're 25, you said?
I am
Golly, 20.
25. A long
Hi.
time.
The past, as you got later in teens and stuff like that, I think we still saw each other when we visited and stuff like that, but I haven't had a chance to talk to you very much and kind of see where you're at and how you're growing and changing. And it's nice to talk to you. And
Hmm.
anyhow,
Anyway, thank you again. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I know it's a lot. It's a podcast. You're being recorded. I know it's sketchy, but I can't thank you enough for being a part of it.
oh, no problem.
Hmm.
No problem. I'm happy to do it. It is a little weird to be recorded, I will
Of
say
course,
that.
of course.
But it's still nice to talk with you nonetheless.
Hmm. And with that, I think we're done. Thank you again.
All right. All right. You take care, Jacob.